My name is Darius King, and at 74 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal this cold world had to offer. I was wrong. On the morning of my only son's wedding, I did not walk down the aisle or give a tearful toast. Instead, I found myself shoved into the trunk of my own Lincoln Town Car by the man I trusted most. I was about to scream until I heard my future daughter-in-law outside. She was not reciting her vows. She was negotiating the price of my death certificate with a Russian loan shark. Before I tell you how I turned her perfect wedding into a crime scene, let me know where you are tuning in from in the comments. If you have ever had to protect a loved one from their own blindness, hit that like button and subscribe. The morning air in Chicago was crisp, the kind of weather that usually made my arthritic knees ache, but today I was too full of adrenaline to notice. I stood in the driveway of my estate, adjusting the silk bow tie that felt like a noose around my thick neck. I have worn work boots and hard hats for 40 years, building a logistics empire from nothing, so a tuxedo always felt like a costume to me. But I was doing it for Jamal, my son, my only boy. He was 32, brilliant with computers but soft in the heart, exactly the way his mother Coretta had raised him to be. He was marrying Tiffany Miller, a woman who looked like an angel and spoke like a poet. I checked my watch. The ceremony was in 2 hours. The black Lincoln Town Car pulled up to the curb. It was polished to a mirror shine. Trevon got out. Trevon was 25. A young man I had pulled out of the juvenile system and trained personally. He was more than a driver to me. He was the eyes and ears I no longer had on the streets. Usually he would open the back door with a smile and ask about my blood pressure. Today his face was made of stone. He did not open the passenger door. He walked straight up to me, grabbed me by the lapels of my $3,000 tuxedo and shoved me hard toward the rear of the car. "What the hell are you doing?" "Trevon, have you lost your mind?" I shouted, trying to plant my feet, but he was young and strong and I was an old man with a cane. "Get in the trunk, Mr. King," he whispered, his voice trembling but urgent. I swung my cane at him, but he caught it easily. He didn't hit me back. He just looked at me with eyes full of terror. "Please, sir, you have to trust me just this once. Get in the trunk and do not make a sound or we are both dead." Before I could process the threat, he swept my legs and pushed me into the dark, carpeted space. The lid slammed down, sealing me in absolute darkness. I lay there curled in a fetal position, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The smell of gasoline and spare tire rubber filled my nose. Panic rose in my throat. Was this a kidnapping? Had Trevon been playing the long game all these years, waiting for the right moment to ransom the old man? I felt for my phone, but in the scuffle it must have fallen out of my pocket. I was blind deaf to the outside world and completely helpless. The engine roared to life. We were moving. I tried to keep track of the turns. Left out of the driveway. A long straight stretch. That would be the interstate. Then the road got rough. I could feel the suspension groaning over potholes. We were not going to the church. We were heading toward the industrial district, the south side, where the law was just a suggestion and old buildings held dark secrets. I thought about Jamal. He would be at the altar waiting for me. He would think I had abandoned him. The thought made my blood boil. If Trevon hurt my boy, I would kill him with my bare hands, even if it was the last thing I did. After 20 minutes, the car slowed down. Gravel crunched under the tires. I knew that sound. It was the sound of a scrapyard. I had spent half my life in places like this. The car stopped. The engine cut off. Silence. I held my breath, clutching a tire iron I had found in the dark. If the trunk opened, I was going to swing. But the trunk did not open. Instead, I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel, heavy boots, and then the clicking of high heels. "Well, you are late," a woman's voice said. I froze. My grip on the tire iron loosened. I knew that voice. It was sweet, melodic, the voice that had charmed my son and fooled me for 6 months. It was Tiffany. "Traffic was a nightmare," Trevon's voice replied, sounding calm, too calm. "He is in the back sleeping. The old man took his pills early." "Good," Tiffany said. Her voice had changed. The sweetness was gone, replaced by a cold, jagged edge. "Is he out cold or just dozing?" "He is out cold," Trevon lied. "Keep him in the car," Tiffany ordered. "I need to finish this business with Nikolai first." Nikolai. The name sent a shiver down my spine. Another set of footsteps approached. Heavy, deliberate. "So this is the Golden Goose," a man's voice grunted. Heavy Eastern European accent. I could smell the cheap cigar smoke seeping through the cracks of the trunk. Tiffany laughed a sound that made my skin crawl. He is not a goose, Nikolai. He is a piggy bank that is about to burst. I pressed my ear against the carpeted wall of the trunk, straining to hear every word. Did you bring the papers? Nikolai asked. I heard the rustle of paper. Here, Tiffany said. This is the draft of the death certificate. I have a doctor on payroll at Mercy Hospital who is ready to sign it. Cause of death will be heart failure. Given his medical history, no one will question it. My heart stopped. I was listening to my own murder being planned, and the timeline Nikolai asked. 30 days, Tiffany replied. We get married today. By law, as his son's wife, I will have power of attorney once we declare the old man mentally incompetent next week. Then we wait 3 weeks and pull the plug. The insurance payout is $5 million, plus the land rights to the warehouse district. That covers what I owe you plus interest. You are a cold woman. Becky Nikolai chuckled. Don't call me Becky, she hissed. Becky is dead. I am Tiffany Miller now, the grieving daughter-in-law. And listen to me, Nikolai, if you mess this up, if your guys at the scrapyard don't make the car accident look real after we get the money, I will take you down with me. I lay in the dark, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of fear, but tears of pure rage. It wasn't just about the money. It was about Jamal. She didn't love him. She didn't even like him. He was just a signature on a page, a stepping stone to get to my vault. Becky. Her real name was Becky. So the plan is set, Nikolai said. Enjoy your wedding. Make sure the old man drinks the toast. The sedative I gave you will mimic a mini stroke. It will make the incompetence ruling easier next week. Don't worry, Tiffany said. He trusts me. He thinks I am the daughter he never had. The old fool even bought me a Rolex. They both laughed. The sound of their laughter was the ugliest thing I had ever heard. Steps retreated. A car door slammed nearby. An engine roared and faded into the distance. I was alone with Trayvon again. The silence stretched for a minute. Then the lock clicked. The trunk lid flew open. The sudden light blinded me. I squinted, raising the tire iron ready to strike. Trayvon was standing there, his hands raised in surrender. He looked terrified. Put it down, Mr. King, he said softly. Please. I lowered the iron, my chest heaving. I climbed out of the trunk, my legs stiff, my tuxedo wrinkled. We were in a secluded corner of an old wrecking yard surrounded by mountains of crushed metal. You knew, I rasped, my voice barely a whisper. I found out yesterday, Trayvon said, looking down at his shoes. I followed her. I saw her meeting with Nikolai. If I told you, you would have confronted her. She would have called the police, claimed you were abusing her, canceled the wedding, and disappeared with Jamal. She has her claws in him deep, Mr. King. If you tried to stop the wedding without proof, Jamal would hate you forever. So you threw me in a trunk, I shouted, grabbing him by the collar. I had to let you hear it, Trayvon said, not pulling away. You needed to know what we are up against. She is not just a gold digger, sir. She is a professional. That guy Nikolai, he is Russian mob. If she doesn't pay him in 30 days, they will kill her and Jamal. I let go of him. I leaned against the bumper of the Lincoln, trying to steady my breathing. My son was marrying a monster. And in 2 hours, he would sign a marriage license that was essentially his own death warrant. What time is it? I asked. 10:30, Trayvon said. The ceremony starts at noon. I brushed the dust off my jacket. I straightened my tie. I looked at my reflection in the car window. The fear was gone. The confusion was gone. In their place was a cold, hard resolve that I hadn't felt since I was fighting for contracts in the mud 40 years ago. She wants a wedding, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Trayvon looked at me confused. Sir, she wants a show. She wants a tragedy. She wants a stroke victim and a grieving widow, I said, turning to look at my driver. We are going to give her a show, Trayvon, but it won't be the one she wrote. I opened the back door of the Lincoln and sat down on the leather seat. Get in the car, son, I commanded. Drive me to the church. But Sir Trayvon stammered. What are you going to do? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I am going to walk my son down the aisle. I am going to drink her poisoned toast. And then I am going to bury Becky Sue so deep she will wish she had stayed dead. Drive. Trayvon nodded, a spark of respect returning to his eyes. He slammed the door, jumped into the driver's seat, and gunned the engine. The Lincoln roared, kicking up dust as we sped out of the scrapyard. I sat back, closing my eyes. I wasn't Darius King, the retired old man, anymore. I was the lion who had just woken up to find a hyena trying to eat his cub. Let the wedding begin. The silence in the car gave me time to think. As the scenery blurred past the tinted windows, my mind drifted back to where this nightmare began. It was exactly 30 days ago, the day Jamal brought her home for Sunday dinner. I should have trusted my gut the moment she walked through the door. My house is a museum of memories. Every painting, every piece of furniture has a story, most of them involving my late wife, Coretta. When Jamal walked in, his face was glowing. He held the hand of a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, Tiffany Miller. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo. She wore a simple white dress that probably cost more than my first car. "Mr. King," she said, her voice soft and respectful. "It is an honor to finally meet the man behind the legend. Jamal talks about you constantly." She handed me a bouquet. Not roses, not lilies, orchids, rare purple orchids, specifically the Vanda variety. I froze. Those were Coretta's favorite flowers. I had not bought them since the day she died because seeing them hurt too much. "I just saw them at the florist and they spoke to me," Tiffany said, looking around the room with wide, innocent eyes. "I hope you like them." I took the flowers. My hands were trembling slightly. "Thank you," I said. "They are lovely." I looked at Jamal. He was beaming. "See, Dad," he mouthed. "I told you she was special." But inside a warning bell went off, a loud clanging bell. How did she know Coretta had been dead for 3 years? There were no pictures of orchids in the house. I had never mentioned them to Jamal in front of her. It was too perfect. A coincidence that felt calculated. We sat down for dinner. I had asked my cook, Mrs. Higgins, to prepare a simple roast. Tiffany ate with the grace of a princess. She complimented the seasoning. She asked about my business. She knew about the logistics hub I built in '82. She knew about the union strikes I handled in '90. "You are a part of history, Mr. King," she said, leaning forward. "My father always said that men who build with their hands are the only true aristocrats in America." Her father, the diplomat, or was it the banker? The story seemed to shift slightly depending on the context. Then came the music. I went to the record player to put on some background noise. I reached for a Miles Davis record, Kind of Blue. Before I could drop the needle, she started humming. She was humming Blue in Green, the exact track I was about to play. I turned to her. "You like jazz?" I asked. "Oh, I adore it," she said. "My grandfather used to play this album every Sunday. It soothes the soul, doesn't it?" I stared at her. First the orchids, now the obscure track on a 60-year-old jazz album. It was like she had studied a dossier on me. I felt like I was being interviewed, not visited. Then came the gift. After dessert, she pulled a small velvet box from her purse. "I know we just met," she said shyly, "but Jamal told me your birthday was last week and we missed it. I wanted to get you something to show my respect." She opened the box. Inside sat a Rolex Submariner, gold and steel. The blue dial caught the light. It was a watch that retailed for $15,000 easily. Jamal gasped. "Tiff, you shouldn't have," he said. "Dad, look at that." I took the watch out of the box. I have collected watches for 40 years. It was my one indulgence. I held it in my hand. It looked perfect. The weight was good. The finish was smooth. But then I turned this bezel. The clicking sound. It was just a fraction too hollow. I looked at the magnification on the date window. It was off by maybe 1 millimeter. It was a fake. A super clone. A high-end forgery that cost maybe $500. If she came from old money from a family of diplomats and bankers, she would know better, or she would buy a real one. Rich people don't give fake gifts to impress their future father-in-law. Grifters do. I put the watch back in the box. "Thank you, Tiffany," I said. "This is too generous." "Please wear it to the wedding," she beamed. That night after they left, I didn't go to sleep. I called a private investigator I had used for employee background checks, a man who could find dirt on a saint. "Find out who she is," I told him. 3 days later, he sat in my study looking confused. "Mr. King, I have been doing this for 20 years, he said, tossing a thin file on my desk. "And I have never seen a file this clean." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, she doesn't exist before 2015, he said. "No high school yearbook photos, no parking tickets, no ex-boyfriends. Her social security number was issued in Ohio, but she claims she grew up in Connecticut, her college degree from Yale. The registrar has a record of her, but no professors remember her. She is a ghost, I said. Exactly, he replied. A normal person has a trail. They have debts. They have awkward photos from prom. They have speeding tickets. Tiffany Miller is a immaculate construction. She is too perfect. That was all the proof I needed. The next evening I sat Jamal down. I had the prenuptial agreement ready on the table. It was a standard document. It protected the warehouse district. It protected his inheritance. It ensured that if they divorced, she would walk away with a settlement, but she wouldn't get the empire. Jamal walked in, saw the papers, and his face went dark. "What is this?" he asked. "It is protection, son," I said calmly. "If she comes from money like she says, she will understand. Rich families sign these all the time." Jamal picked up the papers and threw them across the room. They scattered like dead leaves. "You think she is after your money?" he shouted, his voice cracked with emotion. "That is what this is about, isn't it? You can't believe that a beautiful, educated white woman would actually love me. You think she must be running a scam. It is not about race, Jamal," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It is about the fact that she has no past. It is about the fact that she gave me a fake Rolex. She gave you a gift from her heart," he yelled. "And you sit there judging the price tag. God, you are so cynical. Her family has more money than we do, Dad. They have old money. They don't flash it around like you do with your cars." He was shaking. Tears were forming in his eyes. "I love her, Dad. She is the first woman who makes me feel like I am not just Darius King's son. She makes me feel like a man. If you make her sign this, you are telling me you don't trust my judgment. You are telling me I am stupid." I looked at my son. I saw the pain in his eyes. He was desperate for love, desperate for validation. If I forced the issue, he would leave. He would elope with her and I would lose him forever. I realized then that she had already won. She had driven a wedge between us so deep that the truth couldn't bridge it. "Okay," I said softly. I picked up the papers and tore them in half. No prenup. Jamal slumped into the chair, relieved. "Thank you, Dad. You will see. You are wrong about her. She is perfect." I watched him, my heart breaking. I knew I wasn't wrong. I knew that by tearing up those papers, I had just placed a target on his back. But I had to play the long game. I had to let the wolf into the house so I could trap it. I smiled at my son. "I hope so, Jamal. I really hope so." That was the moment I decided to play the fool. I let her think she had won. I let her think I was just a grumpy, senile old man who was easily manipulated. But behind my back, I started moving assets. I started recording conversations. And I waited. Now, sitting in the back of the Lincoln heading toward the church, I realized I had waited almost too long. The wolf wasn't just hungry. She was rabid. And she wasn't just coming for the money. She was coming for blood. The car slowed down. We were pulling up to the church. The steeple rose into the sky, sharp and white. Trayvon looked at me in the rearview mirror. "We are here, boss." I adjusted my cufflinks. I checked the inside pocket of my jacket where I kept a small digital recorder. "Let's go," I said. "It is time to walk the bride down the plank." The leather seat of the Lincoln felt cold against my back, but it was a luxury compared to the cramped darkness of the trunk. My heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I reached up and adjusted the rearview mirror so I could see Trayvon's eyes. They were wide, with panic darting back and forth between the road and my reflection. "Drive," I commanded, my voice dropping into that low rumble that used to make construction foremen sweat. "Mr. King, we should go to the police station." Trayvon stammered, his grip on the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were ashen. "We have the recording. We have the proof. You heard what she said. She wants to kill you." "No police," I said, pulling a handkerchief from my pocket to wipe the grease smudge from my cheek. "Not yet. If we go to the police now, she plays the victim. She is a pretty young woman from Connecticut, and I am an angry old black man with a history of heart problems. She will spin it. She will say I am confused. She will say I am hallucinating from my medication. And Jamal will believe her because he wants to believe her." I tightened my bow tie, checking the knot in the mirror. It was perfect. Just like the noose she thought she had put around my neck. "Take me to the church, Trayvon," I said. "The play must go on." But Sir Trayvon protested. "Do not argue with me, son," I snapped. "She wants a wedding. She wants to stand in front of God and everyone and pledge her life to my son while planning my funeral. Fine, I will give her the front row seat to her own destruction, but we are not going in there defenseless." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was a miracle it hadn't shattered when I was shoved into the trunk. The screen was cracked, but it lit up. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Saul. Saul Berkowitz was not just my lawyer. He was the only man in Chicago who knew where every skeleton in my closet was buried because he had helped me dig the holes. We had started out together 40 years ago, a black contractor and a Jewish lawyer fighting for scraps in a city that didn't want either of us to succeed. I hit dial. It rang once. It rang. Darius Saul's voice scratched through the speaker, sounding like gravel in a blender. "You are cutting it close. The ceremony starts in 40 minutes. Are you lost or just getting cold feet on behalf of your son?" I didn't laugh. "Saul," I said, "shut up and listen. I need you to execute the Coretta Protocol." The line went dead silent, the kind of silence that is heavier than noise. Darius Saul said, his voice completely stripped of humor. "You know what that means. That is the nuclear option. Once I flip that switch, there is no going back. The assets are frozen. The trust is locked. The warehouse district deeds are transferred to the Shell Corporation in Delaware. If you do this, Jamal gets nothing until he is 50. You are effectively disinheriting him to save the capital." "Do it," I said. "Are you sure?" Saul asked. "Did you find what we were looking for?" I looked out the window. We were passing the old steel mills, the rusted carcasses of industry that used to power this city. "She is not just a gold digger, Saul," I said. "She is a black widow. She has a plan to declare me incompetent next week. She has a doctor on payroll, and she has a loan shark named Nikolai breathing down her neck. If she gets power of attorney, she will liquidate the company before the ink is dry." Jesus, Saul breathed. "Is the boy safe?" "Not yet," I said, "but he will be. I need you at the church, Saul. Bring the file, the real file, and bring the papers for the transfer." "I am on my way," Saul said. "And Darius, be careful. If she is desperate enough to deal with Russian loan sharks, she is desperate enough to do anything." I hung up. The Coretta Protocol. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the grief wash over me. Coretta had made me write that clause into the estate plan 3 years ago, right before the cancer took her. She was always the smart one. She knew Jamal was soft. She knew his heart was too big for his own good. "If he marries the wrong one, Darius," she had whispered from her hospital bed, "you have to protect him from himself. You promise me. You burn the money before you let a stranger take our legacy." I was keeping my promise, Coretta. My phone buzzed in my hand, startling me. I looked down at the screen. A text message. From Tiffany. "Daddy dearest, are you almost here? We are all so worried. Jamal is pacing like a nervous tiger. Please tell me you are okay. Love you." I stared at the words. "Daddy dearest." The audacity of it made bile rise in my throat. She had probably typed this while checking the tracking on my car or texting her hitman. The exclamation point at the end felt like a dagger. I typed back slowly, my thick fingers tapping the glass with deliberate force. "On my way, sweetie. Just had to pick up a special surprise for you. Wouldn't miss this for the world." I hit send. Let her think the surprise is a check. Let her think it is the deed to the lake house. Let her think she has won. Trayvon looked at me in the mirror again. His face was still pale, but his hands had stopped shaking. "You are a scary man, Mr. King," he said softly. "I am not a scary man, Trayvon," I said, looking at the city skyline approaching. "I am a father, and a father does what he has to do." We turned onto the avenue leading to the cathedral. It was a magnificent structure, stone and stained glass, a place of holiness. And today it was going to be the stage for the unholiest revelation of all. I saw the line of cars, Bentleys, Mercedes. Tiffany had insisted on a high society wedding. She had invited people I didn't even know, alleged friends of her family business associates she claimed to have. I realized now they were probably all actors, or worse, other grifters she had roped into her scheme. "Pull around the back," I told Trayvon. "I don't want them to see me yet. I need a minute to get my mask on." "Your mask, sir?" Trayvon asked. "The mask of the frail, forgetful old man," I said. "The mask she wants to see." Trayvon navigated the Lincoln through the narrow alley behind the church. We parked next to the dumpsters. Fitting, I thought. This whole affair was garbage wrapped in silk. I opened the door and stepped out. The fresh air hit me. I straightened my jacket. I checked my cufflinks. I grabbed my cane from the floorboard. I didn't really need the cane, not like she thought I did, but it was a good prop. I leaned heavily on it, practicing my hunch. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I clouded my eyes, letting the sharpness fade into a dull, vacant stare. "How do I look?" I asked Trayvon. "You look like you are ready for the nursing home, boss," Trayvon said, a grim smile finally touching his lips. "Good," I said. I walked toward the back entrance of the church. Every step was a calculation. Every breath was a rehearsal. I was about to give the performance of a lifetime. Inside, I could hear the organ music starting. It was Bach, Joy of Man's Desiring, beautiful, timeless. I pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped into the vestry. The smell of incense and expensive perfume hit me instantly. Jamal was there, standing by the window, looking out at the parking lot. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, so much like me when I was young, but with his mother's gentle eyes. "Dad," he shouted when he saw me. He ran over and hugged me. He was shaking. "Where were you?" "We were so scared. Tiffany said you might have gotten lost. She was about to send someone to look for you." I patted his back, feeling the solid muscle of his shoulder. I wanted to tell him everything right then. I wanted to drag him out of there and drive until we hit the ocean. But I couldn't. He wouldn't believe me. He had to see the snake bite to believe it was venomous. "I am here, son," I said, my voice trembling with a feigned weakness. Just got confused with the directions. My head, it gets cloudy sometimes." Jamal pulled back and looked at me with concern. The trap was set. He was buying it. "It is okay, Dad," he said soothingly. "You are here now. That is all that matters. Tiffany is going to be so happy." I smiled at my son, a sad, tired smile. "Yes," I said. "I bet she will be." Just then the door to the bride's room opened. Tiffany stepped out. She wasn't in her dress yet, just a silk robe. When she saw me, her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, not with relief, but with shock. She hadn't expected me to make it. She had expected a phone call from Nikolai saying the accident had happened early. But she recovered instantly. The mask of the loving daughter slid into place so fast it was terrifying. "Dad," she squealed, rushing over to embrace me. The scent of her expensive perfume was suffocating. It smelled like orchids. "I am so glad you made it," she whispered in my ear. I hugged her back, feeling the cold tension in her body. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Tiffany," I whispered back. I felt her stiffen. Maybe she heard the steel in my voice. Maybe she sensed that the old man hugging her wasn't as frail as he looked. But then I let go and gave her a confused, senile smile. Did I bring the ring?" I asked, patting my pockets frantically. She relaxed. She smiled at Jamal, a look of pitying condescension. "It is okay, Dad." "Jamal has the rings," she said, patting my hand. "You just relax. Go sit in the front row. We have a big day ahead of us." "Oh yes," I thought as I watched her walk away, her hips swaying confident in her victory. A very big day indeed. I watched her disappear back into her dressing room. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was texting Nikolai. She was asking why I was still breathing. I turned to Trayvon, who was standing in the shadows of the doorway. "Go check the wine," I murmured. Trayvon nodded and slipped away toward the reception hall. I took Jamal's arm. "Help your old man to his seat, son," I said. "I want to have a good view." As we walked into the main sanctuary, the guests turned to look. I saw the whispers. I saw the pitying glances. There goes Darius King, the shadow of his former self. Let them look. Let them whisper. In my pocket, my phone buzzed again. A confirmation text from Saul. Protocol activated. The trap is armed. I squeezed Jamal's arm a little tighter. "I love you, son," I said. "I love you too, Dad," he replied. I hoped he would still say that in an hour when I burned his world to the ground to save him from the fire. The organ music swelled, filling the vaulted ceiling of the cathedral with a sound that was supposed to be majestic, but to my ears it sounded like a funeral dirge. I sat in the front row, right next to where my son stood at the altar. The wood of the pew was hard beneath me, and the air smelled of expensive lilies and ancient stone. It was a beautiful church, the kind of place where you whispered even when no service was happening. But today the holiness felt like a lie. I looked around the room. The church was packed. On the left side were my people, men and women I had known for 40 years. Guys from the warehouse with calloused hands and ill-fitting suits who had taken the day off work to see little Jamal get married. My sister Hattie was there wearing a hat so big it had its own zip code, wiping tears from her eyes with a lace handkerchief. They were real. Their love was real. Their joy for my son was genuine. Then I looked to the right, the bride's side. Tiffany had told us her family was small but prestigious. She said they were old money from Connecticut people who valued privacy. Well, they certainly valued something, because the people sitting in those pews looked like they had been ordered out of a catalog. There were about 50 of them, beautiful people. Men, with perfect haircuts and jawlines, wearing suits that cost more than my first car. Women in designer dresses with frozen smiles and dead eyes. They sat with perfect posture. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't laugh. They just sat there facing forward like mannequins in a department store window. I narrowed my eyes. I recognized the woman in the third row. She had blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. I was sure I had seen her in a commercial for headache medicine last week, playing the role of a busy mom. And the man behind her, the one with the silver beard, he looked suspiciously like a local news anchor from a station in Gary, Indiana. They were actors. She had hired a casting agency to fill the pews. My stomach churned. It wasn't just that she was a liar, it was the scale of the lie. The money she must have spent to orchestrate this charade was staggering, and it was all Jamal's money, or rather, my money that she expected to inherit in 30 days. I looked at the couple in the front row of the bride's side, the parents, Mr. and Mrs. Miller. Mr. Miller was a tall man with a stiff upper lip who was supposed to be a retired senator or diplomat or something equally vague. Mrs. Miller was draped in pearls, clutching a Chanel bag like it contained nuclear codes. They hadn't said a word to me before the ceremony, just a curt nod and a tight smile. I watched them closely. They didn't look like parents about to give away their only daughter. They looked like employees on a lunch break. Mr. Miller kept checking his watch, a heavy gold Patek Philippe. He checked it once, then again 30 seconds later. He tapped his foot impatiently. They were in a rush. Why are you in a rush, I thought. Where do you have to be? Do you have another gig at 2 o'clock? Or is the timeline for my murder so tight that you can't afford a delay? I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Jamal. Dad, he whispered. Are you okay? You are sweating. I looked up at my son. He looked so young, so hopeful. He had no idea he was standing in a room full of ghosts and hired guns. I am fine, son, I lied, my voice raspy. Just the heat. And the emotion. It is a big day. He squeezed my shoulder. Thanks for being here, Dad. I know you and Tiffany have had your differences, but it means everything to me that you are here to support us. I looked into his eyes. The eyes of the boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I held when he cried over his first heartbreak. The boy I promised Coretta I would protect. I am always in your corner, Jamal, I said. Never forget that. No matter what happens in the next hour, never forget that I love you. He smiled, confusing my warning for sentimentality. The music changed. The heavy organ chords shifted into the wedding march. The heavy oak doors at the back of the church groaned open. The congregation stood up. And there she was, Tiffany Miller, or Becky Sue, or whatever name she would use in her next life. She was breathtaking. I had to give her that. The dress was a masterpiece of white lace and silk, hugging her curves and trailing behind her like a royal train. Her veil was sheer, covering her face in a mist of modesty. She held a bouquet of white roses. She walked down the aisle with Mr. Miller on her arm. She moved with a slow, practiced grace. She looked at Jamal and her face lit up with a smile that could have powered the entire city grid. It was the perfect performance. Jamal let out a small breath, a sound of pure adoration. He was hooked, line and sinker. But as she got closer, I saw what the camera lenses couldn't see. I saw the way her eyes darted to the side, scanning the room, not for friends, but for threats. I saw the way her knuckles were white around the bouquet. I saw the tiny bead of sweat near her hairline. She walked past me. For a split second, her eyes met mine. There was no love in them, no warmth, only a cold calculation. She was checking to see if the sedative was working. She was checking to see if the old man was fading. I gave her a blank, slack-jawed stare. I let my head loll slightly to the side. She smirked. A tiny, almost imperceptible curl of her red lips. She thought she had won. She reached the altar. Mr. Miller handed her off to Jamal with a firm handshake that lacked any fatherly affection. Then he retreated to his seat, checking his watch again as he sat down. The priest began to speak. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The words washed over me. Holy matrimony. Words that meant sacred trust. Words that were being defiled with every second this farce continued. The priest went on about love, about patience, about how love keeps no record of wrongs. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to stand up and scream that the woman standing there had a record of wrongs longer than the Bible itself. But I waited. I gripped the handle of my cane until my hand cramped. I waited for the moment. The traditional moment. The moment that only happens in movies but was about to happen in real life. The priest looked out at the congregation. If there is anyone here present who knows of any just cause why these two should not be legally joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of silence where you can hear a pin drop. Usually this is just a formality, a pause for effect. I counted to 3 in my head. 1, 2, 3. I didn't stand up. I didn't shout. I coughed. It wasn't a polite clearing of the throat. It was a loud, wet, hacking cough that echoed off the stone walls like a gunshot. Ka-hack. The sound shattered the silence. Every head turned. Tiffany spun around so fast her veil whipped across her face. Her eyes were wide, terrified. For a second the mask slipped completely. I saw the panic. She thought I was going to speak. She thought I knew. She thought the game was over. Her hand went to her throat. She took a step back from Jamal. The priest stopped. He looked down at me over his spectacles. Jamal looked at me with concern. Dad. I kept coughing for another few seconds, milking the moment, letting the fear marinate in her soul. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her heart to stop for a beat. Then I pulled out my handkerchief and wiped my mouth. I looked up at the priest with watery, innocent eyes. I looked at Tiffany, who was trembling. I smiled a weak, apologetic smile. So sorry, I croaked, my voice trembling. Dry throat, old age. Please. Continue. It is a beautiful ceremony. The tension in the room snapped like a rubber band. A few people chuckled nervously. The priest exhaled. Jamal patted my back. Get him some water, someone whispered. But I kept my eyes on Tiffany. She didn't laugh. She didn't smile. She was staring at me, and she was pale as a sheet. She knew. Somewhere deep down in her lizard brain, she sensed that that cough wasn't an accident. It was a warning shot. She turned back to the priest, but her shoulders were rigid. Her perfect posture was gone. Mr. Miller in the front row leaned forward. He wasn't looking at his watch anymore. He was looking at me. His eyes were cold and hard. He wasn't a senator. I knew that look. That was the look of a man who solved problems for a living, a cleaner, a fixer. I had rattled the cage. The priest cleared his throat and continued, but the rhythm was broken. The magic was gone. I promise to be true to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. Tiffany repeated the words, but her voice shook. In sickness and in health. She choked on the word health. I sat back in the pew. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The first shot had been fired. The enemy was nervous. They were checking their watches. They were looking over their shoulders. They were in a rush to finish the job. But they didn't know that time was actually on my side. Every minute that passed was a minute closer to Trayvon coming back with the results from the wine glass. Every minute was a minute closer to Saul walking through those doors with the file. I looked at the statue of Jesus hanging on the cross above the altar. Forgive me, Lord, I thought, for I am about to bring a storm into your house, but you chased the money changers out of the temple with a whip. Surely you won't mind if I chase a few devils out with the truth. Jamal was saying his vows now. His voice was strong and clear, filled with emotion. I give you this ring as a symbol of my love and faithfulness. He slid the diamond band onto her finger. It was a rock, a 3-carat flawless diamond that had cost him his life savings. Tiffany looked at the ring. For a second, the greed cut through the fear. She smiled, a genuine smile this time. The smile of a predator who has just secured the meal. She took his hand. I give you this ring. She slid the gold band onto his finger. I looked at Mr. Miller again. He was texting under his jacket. His thumb moved furiously. Who are you texting, I wondered. Nikolai. Are you telling him to bring the car around? Are you telling him the old man is still kicking? I checked my own phone under the cover of my jacket. A text from Trevon. Got it. It is positive. Benzodiazepines and something else. Lethal in high doses with alcohol. Returning now. I felt a cold chill. She hadn't just drugged the wine to make me sleep. She had drugged it to kill me. Or at least to cause enough damage that the hospital would do the rest. I looked at the beautiful bride standing in the light. You didn't just want my money, Becky Sue. You wanted my life. The priest smiled. By the power vested in me. Not yet, I thought. Not yet. I looked toward the back of the church. The heavy doors were still closed. Where is Saul? The priest took a breath. I now pronounce you, come on, Saul, husband and... The doors at the back of the church didn't open. Wife. My heart sank. You may kiss the bride. Jamal leaned in. Tiffany closed her eyes. They kissed. The polite applause started. The actors in the pews clapped with practiced enthusiasm. I clapped too. My hands felt like lead. It wasn't over. The ceremony was just the prologue. The reception was the main event. Mr. Miller stood up abruptly. He didn't wait for the recessional music. He walked straight toward the side exit, tapping his earpiece. Earpiece. Parents don't wear earpieces at weddings. Security guards do. I realized then that we were not just up against a grifter. We were trapped in a room with a paramilitary operation. I stood up, leaning on my cane. Jamal and Tiffany were walking back down the aisle, beaming. Tiffany looked at me as she passed. This time she winked. It was a victory lap. I smiled back. Enjoy it while it lasts, sweetheart, I thought. Because the honeymoon is going to be in a cell. I turned to follow them out of the sanctuary. The game had moved to the next level, and I was ready to play. The reception was held in the Crystal Ballroom of the Drake Hotel, a venue that screamed old money and new debt. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a warm golden light over the room. The tables were draped in silk. The centerpieces were towering arrangements of white roses, and of course those purple Vanda orchids she had used to manipulate me. It was a scene of perfect elegance, a masterpiece of event planning, and it made my skin crawl. I sat at the head table, the place of honor reserved for the father of the groom. To my left sat Jamal, looking dazed and happy, his hand constantly finding Tiffany's. To my right should have been the mother of the groom, but that chair was empty. Coretta was gone, and in her place sat a ghost of memory that Tiffany had tried to exorcise with her perfume and her lies. I watched the room. The hired guests were earning their paychecks. I saw the man with the silver beard, the fake senator, laughing heartily at a joke told by one of my warehouse foremen. It was a surreal collision of worlds. Real people, my people, mixing with actors who were probably checking their watches and wondering when the catering truck would leave. I didn't eat. The filet mignon looked tender, the lobster bisque smelled rich, but I didn't touch a thing. My stomach was a knot of tension. I sipped water from a sealed bottle I had taken from the bar myself, ignoring the crystal goblet at my place setting. Then I saw her coming. Tiffany rose from her seat. She had changed into a second dress, something slinky and silver that moved like liquid mercury. She held a bottle of wine in one hand and a single oversized crystal goblet in the other. She bypassed the waiters. She bypassed the other guests. She was coming straight for me. The room seemed to dim around the edges, my focus narrowing to that bottle. It was a dusty, dark bottle without a label, or rather the label had been peeled off, leaving just the dark glass. "Dad," she said, her voice cutting through the hum of conversation. She stood over me, beaming. The spotlight caught her diamond earring, sending shards of light into my eyes. I looked up, adjusting my glasses with a trembling hand. "Yes, dear," I asked, keeping my voice thin and reedy. "I have a surprise for you," she announced, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. She held up the bottle. "Jamal told me you were born in 1949. Well, I have been saving this for a special occasion. This is a vintage Cabernet from that exact year. It was in my grandfather's cellar." Jamal looked up impressed. "Wow, Tiff. That is incredible. Dad, do you hear that, 1949? I heard it all right. I also knew that a 1949 Cabernet, unless stored in absolute zero conditions, would be vinegar by now. But logic wasn't the point. The point was the gesture. The point was the poison. She poured the wine. The liquid was dark, almost black. It swirled in the large goblet, heavy and ominous. She didn't pour any for herself. She didn't pour any for Jamal. Just one glass. For me. For the man who built this family, she said, placing the glass in front of me. To your health, Dad. And to our future. To my health. The irony was so thick I could taste it. She stood there waiting. She didn't move away. She didn't go back to her seat. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, watching me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And that was when I heard Coretta's voice, clear as a bell ringing in the back of my mind. It was a memory from 30 years ago. We were in a negotiation with a crooked union boss. The man had offered me a drink, smiling, slapping my back. I had reached for it, but Coretta had squeezed my knee under the table. Later in the car she had told me, Darius never drank anything from a man who won't look you in the eye when he hands it to you, a man who looks at your hands or your mouth or the glass. He is hiding something. An honest man looks at your soul. I looked at Tiffany. She wasn't looking at my eyes. She was looking at my hand, waiting for it to wrap around the stem of the glass. Her gaze was fixated on the liquid, anticipating the moment it would touch my lips. She was waiting for the kill. I reached out. My hand shook. I wasn't acting this time. The rage and the adrenaline were making me tremor. I wrapped my thick, calloused fingers around the delicate crystal stem. "Thank you, Tiffany," I said. "You are too kind." I lifted the glass. I saw her shoulders relax. I saw a tiny exhale of breath escape her lips. She thought she had done it. I brought the glass closer to my nose. I smelled the wine. Beneath the notes of oak and blackberry, there was something else, something chemical, something sharp and medicinal that shouldn't be there. "I am going to make a toast," I said, starting to stand up. "No, Dad." "You don't have to stand," Jamal said, reaching for me. I insisted. I pushed myself up on my cane, holding the glass high. The wine sloshed dangerously near the rim. "To family," I said, my voice wavering. "To the ones we choose. And the ones who choose us." I took a step to the side, ostensibly to face the room. But as I moved, I let my cane slip on the polished floor. It was a calculated stumble, a move I had practiced in my mind a dozen times in the last 10 seconds. "Whoa," I cried out. My left leg buckled, my right arm flailed, and the glass of wine, the 1949 vintage poison, went flying. It didn't hit the floor. It hit the woman sitting at the table directly behind me, the woman in the blue sequined dress. The one I suspected was an extra from a soap opera. The red liquid splashed across her chest, soaking the sequins, staining the blue fabric a deep, bloody purple. The glass shattered against her chair, sending crystal shards skittering across the parquet floor. "Ah!" the woman shrieked. She jumped up, knocking her chair over. "Oh my God, my dress. This is a rental." The room went silent. The scream hung in the air. "This is a rental." A real guest, a wealthy friend of the family, as Tiffany claimed, would have said, "Oh, my dress," or "Is he okay?" They wouldn't have screamed about a rental deposit. I saw Tiffany's face. For a moment the mask shattered completely. It wasn't concern for the guest. It wasn't concern for me. It was pure, unadulterated fury. She stared at the puddle of wine on the floor like it was her own blood. That was her weapon. That was her 30-day timeline soaking into the carpet. I slumped back into my chair, clutching my chest, playing the part. "Oh Lord," I gasped. "I am so sorry. My hand, it just gave out." Jamal was on his feet instantly. "Dad, are you okay?" He grabbed a napkin and started dabbing at the woman's dress, apologizing profusely. "I am so sorry. My father he is not well. We will pay for the dress." The woman was still fuming, wiping at the stain. "It is ruined." "Do you know how much the deposit was on this?" Tiffany stepped in. She grabbed the woman's arm, her grip tight, her nails digging in. "It is fine," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Sit down. We will handle it." She turned to me. Her eyes were 2 chips of blue ice. "You are so clumsy, Dad," she said. The sweetness was gone. It was a flat statement of fact. I looked up at her, blinking behind my glasses. "I am sorry, Tiffany," I whined. "The wine." It slipped. The waiters descended. Or rather, one waiter descended. Trevon. He was wearing a white jacket that was a size too tight, carrying a silver tray and a cloth. He moved with a speed that no ordinary waiter possessed. "Let me clean that up, sir," he said, his voice professional and indistinct. He dropped to his knees. But he didn't just mop up the mess. I watched him closely. He used the cloth to soak up the puddle of wine on the floor. Then, with a sleight of hand that would have made a magician proud, he dropped the sodden cloth into a plastic Ziploc bag he had hidden under the tray. He picked up the largest shard of the broken glass, the one that still had a few drops of the dark liquid clinging to the bottom, and dropped that into the bag too. It took 3 seconds. He stood up, holding the tray with a pile of wet napkins covering the evidence. "I will get you another glass, sir," Trayvon said, looking me in the eye. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He had it. He had the bullet she had tried to fire at me. "No," Tiffany snapped. We all looked at her. She stammered, realizing she had shouted. That was the only bottle. It was unique. There isn't any more." She looked at the wet stain on the floor with a look of genuine mourning. She had lost her primary weapon. Now she would have to resort to messy alternatives. "That is a shame," I said, shaking my head. It smelled powerful. Jamal sat back down, looking exhausted. "It is okay, Tiff. It was an accident. Dad didn't mean to." Tiffany took a deep breath. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was recalibrating. She was moving to plan B. "Of course," she said, forcing a smile that looked painful. "Accidents happen." She reached out and patted my hand. Her hand was cold. "You should drink some water, Dad," she said. "You look pale." I looked at the water bottle I had brought. I looked at her. "I am fine," I said. "Just tired." She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. To anyone watching, it looked like a loving daughter comforting her father. "You should be careful," she whispered. "Old men who fall down, sometimes they don't get back up." It was a threat, plain and simple. I turned my head and whispered back. "And sometimes, my dear, they drag you down with them." She pulled back, her eyes widening. She wasn't sure if she had heard me correctly. My voice had been so low, so mumbled. Was it a threat, or was it just the ramblings of a senile mind? She chose to believe the latter. She had to, because if she believed the former, she would have to run right now, and she was too greedy to run. She straightened up and clapped her hands. "Let's cut the cake," she announced. As the guests cheered, I watched Trayvon slip out the side door with the silver tray. He was heading to the kitchen and then out to the parking lot where his friend from the forensics lab was waiting. I checked my watch. 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, we would have the results. In 30 minutes, Saul would be here with the paperwork. I looked at the cake. It was 5 tiers high, covered in white fondant and sugar orchids. It looked beautiful, it looked sweet, and I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't eat a single crumb of it. I sat back, gripping my cane. The wine was spilled, the first battle was won. But the war was just getting started. And as I looked at my son laughing at something his new wife whispered to him, I prayed that when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't destroy him along with her. But I knew it would. Truth is like surgery. It heals, but first it cuts. I braced myself. The scalpel was in my hand, and I was ready to make the first incision. As I sat there watching the guests cheer for the cake cutting, I couldn't help but think back to the signature that had supposedly sealed my fate. It happened exactly 7 days ago. The memory was as sharp as a razor blade and just as dangerous. Jamal had come to pick me up early that morning. He was driving a new car, a flashy SUV that I knew he couldn't afford on his engineer's salary. He told me we were going to lunch, but we ended up in a glass skyscraper downtown. It wasn't the dusty, comfortable office of my old friend Saul, where the coffee tasted like mud and the advice was always solid. This place was different. It smelled of ozone and expensive cologne. The carpet was so thick it felt like walking on quicksand, which was appropriate considering I was about to be asked to sign away my life. We walked into a conference room that was all chrome and glass. The view of the Chicago skyline was breathtaking, but I didn't have time to admire it. Tiffany was already there. She was sitting at the head of the table next to a man who looked less like a lawyer and more like a predator in a 3-piece suit. He introduced himself as Mr. Sterling. His handshake was limp and his smile didn't reach his eyes. Dad, Jamal said, pulling out a chair for me. "We just need to handle some paperwork. Tiffany and I want to make sure you are taken care of." I sat down. I moved slowly, gripping the arms of the chair, pretending to need the support. I saw Tiffany exchange a quick glance with Mr. Sterling. A glance that said, "Here comes the mark." "What kind of paperwork?" I asked, keeping my voice shaky. "It is just insurance, Dad," Tiffany said. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. With the wedding coming up and your health being, well, unpredictable, we thought it would be best to update your life insurance policy, just to make sure the estate taxes don't eat up everything you built. Insurance. It was a clever lie. It appealed to my pride. It appealed to my desire to protect my legacy. If I had been the man they thought I was, the senile old fool, I would have signed it without reading. Mr. Sterling slid a document toward me. It was thick, at least 50 pages. The title page was folded back, so I just saw the signature line on the last page. "We have already reviewed it," Mr. Sterling said, his voice smooth like oil. "It is a standard comprehensive coverage plan. We just need your signature here, here, and here." He pointed a gold fountain pen at the 3 X marks. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my reading glasses. I took my time wiping them with my handkerchief. I saw Jamal shifting in his seat. He looked uncomfortable. He was picking at a loose thread on his trousers. He knew this wasn't right. He knew you don't rush business deals. But he was too weak to stop the train his fiancée was driving. I put on my glasses and reached for the document. "Let me just take a look," I said. Mr. Sterling's hand hovered over the paper as if he wanted to snatch it back. "Oh, Mr. King," he said with a condescending chuckle. "It is very dense legalese. Very boring stuff. We wouldn't want to bore you with the details. Jamal has already read it." I looked at my son. "Jamal," I asked, "did you read this?" Jamal looked up. He looked at Tiffany. She widened her eyes slightly, a silent command. "Yeah, Dad," Jamal mumbled. "It is fine. It is just standard stuff." I looked back at the document. I didn't flip to the front page. That would have been too suspicious. Instead, I used a trick I learned 30 years ago when dealing with crooked suppliers. I let my hand rest on the page and I used my thumb to slightly lift the corner of the previous pages just enough to catch a few words. I saw the words durable power of attorney. I saw the words medical proxy. I saw the phrase in the event of incapacitation. This wasn't life insurance. This was a death warrant. This was a document that gave Jamal, and by extension Tiffany, full legal control over my finances and my medical decisions the moment a doctor declared me unfit. And knowing them, they probably had a doctor ready to declare me unfit before the ink was dry. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced my face to remain blank. If I refused to sign now, they would know I was onto them. They would find another way. Maybe a stairway accident. Maybe the wrong pills. I had to make them think they had won so I could buy time to destroy them. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. "I hate these new pens," I grumbled. My hand shook. I let the tremor travel up my arm. Tiffany leaned in. "Do you need help, Dad? I can guide your hand." "No," I snapped. Then I softened my tone. "No, sweetie. I can do it. I am not dead yet." I lowered the pen to the paper. "My full legal name is Darius Luther King. My signature has been the same for 50 years. A sweeping D, a sharp L, and a strong K. It is the signature that is on the deeds to the warehouse district. It is the signature on my bank accounts. It is the signature that every judge in Chicago recognizes. But today I was going to make a mistake." I pressed the pen to the paper. I wrote Darius. Then I paused. I let the pen hover. I looked up at Jamal. "I am doing this for you, son," I said. I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but he didn't stop me. I looked back at the paper. Instead of an L for Luther, I wrote a jagged, shaky J, Darius J. King. And then I finished with a messy scrawl that looked vaguely like my last name. I did it 3 times. Every time I replaced the L with a J. I sat back, dropping the pen. "There," I said, sounding exhausted. "Is that all?" Mr. Sterling snatched the papers away before the ink could dry. He flipped through them, checking the signatures. He saw the name. He saw the J. But he didn't know my middle name. He assumed I was just an old man with bad handwriting. Or maybe he thought the J stood for something else. He didn't care. He just wanted the signature. "Perfect," Mr. Sterling said, closing the folder with a snap. "Congratulations, Mr. King. You have secured your family's future." Tiffany beamed. She looked like a cat that had just swallowed a canary. She reached over and hugged me. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. "You have no idea how much this means to us." Oh, I had an idea. It meant $5 million and a warehouse district. I stood up, leaning heavily on the table. "I am tired, Jamal," I said. "Take me home." As we walked to the elevator, I looked back at the conference room. Mr. Sterling was shaking Tiffany's hand. They were celebrating. They didn't know that a signature with the wrong middle initial on a legal document of this magnitude renders it contestable in probate court. It creates a loophole. It proves that the signer was either not of sound mind or was under duress, or simply that the document was executed incorrectly. It wasn't a silver bullet. It wouldn't stop them forever. But it was a delay. It was a wrench in their gears. If they tried to use this document to pull the plug on me next week, Saul would drag them into court and point out the error. He would demand a handwriting analysis. He would subpoena the medical records. He would tie them up in litigation for months. And months was all I needed. In the elevator, Jamal wouldn't look at me. "You did a good thing, Dad," he said to the closed doors. I looked at his reflection in the polished steel. "Did I, son?" I asked. "Or did I just sign away my freedom?" He didn't answer. He just adjusted his tie and stared at the floor numbers counting down. Back in the present, the sound of applause brought me back to the ballroom. Tiffany was feeding Jamal a piece of cake. She dabbed a bit of frosting from his lip with a napkin. It was a tender gesture performed for an audience of fools. She looked at me and smiled. It was the smile of a woman who thought she held the power of attorney in her safe, a woman who thought she owned me. I smiled back. I took a sip of water. "You have the paper, Tiffany," I thought. "But you have the wrong name. You are trying to cash a check written by a ghost. And the best part, you won't find out until you try to kill me." I looked at the guests. I looked at the hired actors. I looked at the waiters. And then I looked at the door. Saul was late. My heart gave a little flutter. Not a heart attack, but a pang of anxiety. Saul was never late. If he wasn't here, it meant something had gone wrong. Had they got to him? Had Nikolai stopped him? I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my back. I had played the game perfectly. I had spilled the poison. I had faked the signature. But if I didn't have the real file, the evidence of who Becky Sue really was, all of this was just a delay. I needed the hammer. Suddenly my phone buzzed in my pocket. 3 short vibrations. It wasn't a text. It was a signal. I looked toward the service entrance near the kitchen. The door opened just a crack. A hand appeared. It held a brown leather briefcase. Saul wasn't late. He was sneaking in. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The cavalry had arrived. Now I just needed to get Jamal away from the Black Widow long enough to show him the web. I tapped my glass with my spoon. A sharp metallic sound that cut through the chatter. "Jamal," I said, my voice projecting more strength than I should have shown. "Come here for a second. I need to give you your wedding present." Tiffany's ears perked up. She thought the present was the deed. She nudged Jamal. "Go on, honey," she said. "See what Daddy got us." Jamal stood up and walked toward me. I stood up to meet him. "Let's go to the terrace," I said. "It is private." We walked toward the doors. I could feel Tiffany's eyes boring into my back. She wanted to follow. I knew she was debating it, but she couldn't leave her own reception without raising eyebrows. We stepped out onto the terrace. The cool night air hit us. The city lights of Chicago twinkled in the distance. Saul stepped out from the shadows. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked and he was breathing hard. He walked straight up to us and slammed the briefcase onto a patio table. "Who is this?" Jamal asked, startled. "Dad, what is going on?" "This is Saul," I said, my voice dropping the senile act completely. "And he is here to save your life." I opened the briefcase. "Look," I commanded. Jamal looked down. He saw the photos. He saw the police reports. He saw the mugshots of the woman he had just married. Becky Sue. Fraud. Arson. Identity theft. The color drained from Jamal's face. He looked like he was going to be sick. "Dad," he whispered. "What is this?" "This is the woman you married," I said. "And she doesn't want your love, Jamal. She wants your inheritance. And she was planning to kill me to get it." Jamal shook his head. No, this isn't real. You are lying." I grabbed his shoulders. I shook him hard. "Wake up, son," I roared. "The wine, the signature, the rush. It is all a setup." Before he could answer, the terrace door burst open. Tiffany stood there. She wasn't smiling anymore. Behind her stood Mr. Miller and the man with the silver beard. They weren't actors. They were muscle. "Get away from him," she shrieked. The trap was sprung. But this time the lion was out of the cage. The terrace encounter had sent my adrenaline spiking, but I needed a moment to compose myself before the final act. I watched Jamal staring at the photos in the briefcase, his world crumbling in real time, but before I could press the advantage, Tiffany had burst in with her goons. I needed to separate them. I needed to let the poison of doubt seep into Jamal's mind without her there to suck it out with sweet lies. I stepped away from the commotion, feigning a coughing fit. "I need the restroom," I wheezed, waving my hand dismissively at Mr. Miller, who looked ready to snap my neck right there on the balcony. I shuffled past them. Tiffany's eyes tracked me like a hawk, but she was too busy doing damage control with Jamal to follow. She signaled to the man with the silver beard, the fake uncle, but I moved faster than they expected, slipping through the French doors and into the crowded ballroom before ducking down a side corridor. The men's room at the Drake Hotel was a palace of marble and gold fixtures. It was empty, thank God. I walked to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The eyes staring back were old and tired, rimmed with red, but the fire behind them was still burning. "You are almost there, Darius," I whispered to my reflection. "Just hold on a little longer." I reached for a paper towel to dry my hands. Click. The sound of the heavy door locking behind me echoed off the tile walls like a gunshot. I didn't turn around immediately. I finished drying my hands slowly, deliberately. I knew who it was before I even saw him. I could smell him. Beneath the layer of expensive cologne he had bathed in for the wedding, there was the faint, unmistakable scent of old engine oil and stale tobacco. It was the smell of the scrapyard. I turned around, leaning heavily on my cane. Standing in front of the door, arms crossed over his chest, was the man Tiffany had introduced as her Uncle Nico from Connecticut. Up close, he looked even less like a Connecticut blue blood than he did from a distance. The suit was expensive, but it didn't fit him right. It was tight across the shoulders and loose at the waist, the kind of fit you get when you buy off the rack and have too much muscle and too much belly. A tribal tattoo peeked out from above his collar, a jagged black line that crept up his neck like a scar. But it was the eyes that gave him away. They were dead eyes, shark eyes. "Hello, Uncle Nico," I said, my voice calm. "Or do you prefer the name I heard in the trunk of my car?" "Nikolai." He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It revealed a gold tooth in the back of his mouth. "You are a sharp old man," he said. His accent was thick now. The American veneer dropped completely. Russian, heavy and gravelly. "I try to pay attention," I said, gripping my cane. He took a step toward me. He was big, maybe 6'3", 250 pounds of bad intentions. "You should have stayed in the trunk," he said softly. "It would have been easier, a nice long sleep. Now it has to be messy." He walked past the sinks, checking the stalls to make sure we were alone. "Tiffany is panicking," he said, turning back to me. "She says you know things. She says you are playing games." "I am just an old man at a wedding," I said. "What games could I play?" "Drop the act, Darius," he snapped. "We know about the signature. We know you didn't drink the wine, and we know you have that land at the port." He stepped into my personal space. I could feel the heat radiating off him. "That land is worth $20 million to the developers," he hissed. "But to my organization, it is worth much more. We need that access point, and you are going to give it to us." I looked him up and down. "So that is what this is really about," I said. "It is not just about Tiffany's debts. It is about smuggling. You want my warehouses to move your product." He chuckled. "Smart. Too smart. That is why you have to go. But before you go, you are going to sign a quitclaim deed. Tiffany has it in her garter belt. She will bring it to you later. You will sign it, and then you will have a heart attack." "And if I don't?" I asked. He shrugged. "Then the heart attack happens anyway. But first we break your son's legs. Maybe we break his fingers one by one. He is a pianist, isn't he? Or a coder. Hard to code with smashed hands." Rage flared in my chest, hot and white. Threatening me was one thing. Threatening Jamal was a declaration of war. But I didn't lash out. I didn't swing my cane. That is what a younger man would have done, and that is how a younger man would have died. Instead, I laughed. It started as a low chuckle in my throat and grew into a loud barking laugh that bounced off the marble walls. Nikolai looked confused. He frowned, his brow furrowing. "Something is funny, old man," he asked, stepping closer, his fists clenching. "You are," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "You really are. You come in here with your cheap suit and your bad breath trying to scare me. You think because I am 74 and walk with a stick that I am prey." I straightened my back. I stood to my full height. I was still shorter than him, but in that moment I felt 10 feet tall. "You are not the first Russian thug to try and muscle in on the Chicago docks, son," I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing the tremor completely. I took a step toward him. He was so surprised he actually took a step back. Nikolai, I said, letting the name roll off my tongue. You are what, 35? 30. 40 maybe. You are a baby. You don't remember how this city used to be. I know enough, he growled, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You know nothing, I spat. I pointed my cane at his chest. The rubber tip poked his expensive silk tie. You work for the Bratva, right? Or some splinter cell of it. Who is your boss? Don't tell me. Let me guess. Is it Kirill? No, he is too young. Is it Heavy Vanya? No, he is in federal prison. I leaned in close, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You answer to Volkov, don't you? Or maybe the ghost of Volkov. Nikolai froze. His face went pale. The name hit him like a physical blow. How do you know that name? He stammered. I fixed his Cadillac. I lied smoothly. It was a bluff, a massive, dangerous bluff, but it was grounded in truth. I had fixed cars in the 90s, and I knew the names of the players because you couldn't run a logistics business in Chicago without knowing who owned the streets. I had never met Volkov personally, but I knew his reputation. He was the bogeyman of the underworld. A legend. 1992. I continued weaving the lie with the confidence of a man who has nothing to lose. A black Fleetwood Brougham. Bullet holes in the rear quarter panel. He came to my shop at 3 in the morning. Just him and a driver. He paid me $10,000 cash to patch it up and forget I ever saw him. I stared into Nikolai's eyes. He told me something that night, I said. He told me that he respects men who work with their hands. He said that a man who builds something is worth 10 men who just take. I poked him with the cane again, harder this time. You are a taker, Nikolai. You are a scavenger. And let me tell you something else. I still have the number he gave me, the emergency number. He said if any low-level punk ever tried to bother me, I should call it. It was pure fiction. Volkov was probably dead or in Siberia. But Nikolai didn't know that. Thugs like him lived on fear and hierarchy. The mention of a founding father of his organization was enough to make him doubt everything. You are lying, he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I challenged. Do you want to take that bet? Go ahead, break my son's fingers. See what happens to you. If Volkov doesn't get you, my union brothers will. You think the dock workers in this city answer to you? They answer to me. I fed their families for 40 years. One phone call and your body ends up in a car crusher and comes out the size of a toaster. Nikolai stared at me. He looked at the cane. He looked at my eyes. He was looking for the fear he had seen earlier, but the fear was gone. He was looking at Darius King, the man who had survived riots, recessions, and corrupt aldermen. He stepped back. He adjusted his jacket nervously, covering the tattoo on his neck. This isn't over, he muttered. Tiffany owes us. We will collect. You collect from her? I said, stepping aside to clear the path to the door. Leave my family out of it, or I will burn your whole operation down with a single match. Nikolai hesitated for 1 second more, then he turned and unlocked the door. He didn't look back. He slipped out into the hallway, disappearing like the rat he was. As the door clicked shut, I let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. My knees buckled. I grabbed the sink to keep from falling. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might actually explode this time. I had no number. I had no direct line to the Russian mob. I was just an old man with a vivid imagination and a good memory for names. But it had worked. I looked at myself in the mirror again. I looked older than I had 5 minutes ago. But I also looked stronger. I washed my face again. The cold water felt good. 1 down, I thought. 2 to go. Nikolai was neutralized for the moment. He was confused and scared. He would hesitate. And hesitation was all the time I needed. Now I had to deal with the real threat, the one wearing the white dress. I straightened my tie. I picked up my cane. I walked back out into the party. The band was playing a slow song. Couples were dancing. It looked so peaceful, so normal. I saw Jamal sitting at the table alone. His head was in his hands. Tiffany was standing over him, whispering furiously in his ear. She was trying to spin the narrative. She was trying to fix the cracks I had made. I walked toward them. It was time to drop the bomb. As I approached, I saw Trayvon standing by the kitchen door. He gave me a thumbs up. He had the recording. He had the test results. And he had something else. I could see the edge of a projector screen set up near the stage for the slideshow Tiffany had planned. A slideshow of their love story. Well, I thought, let's add a few deleted scenes to that movie. I walked up to the table. Tiffany looked up. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. She looked past me looking for Nikolai. When she didn't see him, a flash of panic crossed her face. "Where is Uncle Nico?" she asked sharply. "He had to leave," I said, smiling pleasantly. He remembered he had an urgent appointment. Something about a Cadillac. Tiffany froze. She didn't know what that meant, but she knew it wasn't good. Jamal looked up. His eyes were red. "Dad," he said. "Is it true, what you showed me?" Tiffany grabbed his arm. "Don't listen to him, Jamal. He is sick. He is having an episode." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the microphone I had swiped from the DJ booth on my way in. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice booming through the speakers, cutting through the music. The room went silent. "If I could have your attention, please. The father of the groom would like to say a few words." Tiffany lunged for me, but Trayvon stepped in her path, blocking her with the ease of a linebacker. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the hired actors. I looked at my family. And then I looked at the camera recording the wedding video. "Smile, Tiffany," I said. "You are about to be famous." Standing there with the microphone in my hand, staring down at the woman who wanted me dead, my eyes drifted to my son. Jamal looked so lost. He looked like a little boy who had dropped his ice cream cone in the sand. He didn't understand why his father was attacking his wife. He didn't understand the war that was being fought over his head. And for a split second my resolve wavered, not because I was afraid of Tiffany, but because I knew that what I was about to do would break him. My mind flashed back to just 2 hours ago, the dressing room at the church. It was right after I had arrived from the trunk incident. I had just cleaned the grease off my face in the bathroom and walked into the vestry where Jamal was waiting. It was a small room, smelled of old wood and lavender, mirrors on every wall. Jamal was standing in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting his bow tie for the 10th time. He looked sharp. He looked like a prince. But when he saw me, his face lit up with that guileless, open smile that he had inherited from his mother. "Dad," he said, turning around, "are you okay? You look a little shaken." I gripped my cane, leaning on it harder than I needed to. I was still vibrating from the adrenaline of the trunk, from the sound of Tiffany negotiating my murder. "I am fine, son." I lied, my voice raspy. "Just old age." The traffic was bad. Jamal rushed over and guided me to a velvet armchair. "Sit down, Dad. I will get you some water." He poured a glass from a crystal pitcher. He handled it with such care. He was a good boy. That was the tragedy of it. He wasn't a shark like me. He wasn't a wolf like Tiffany. He was a golden retriever, loyal, trusting, and completely oblivious to the fact that he was living in a house full of fleas. He sat down on the ottoman in front of me, his knees touching mine. He looked at me with shining eyes. "I am so happy you are here, Dad," he said. "I know you had your doubts about Tiffany. I know the Rolex thing was weird, but she really loves us. She really wants to be part of this family." I looked at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him. "She wants to bury this family, Jamal." I just nodded. "She is a determined woman," I said carefully. "She is," Jamal agreed eagerly. "And she is smart, Dad, like really smart about money. That is actually something I wanted to talk to you about." Before the ceremony starts, my stomach tightened. Here it comes, I thought. The pitch. "Oh," I asked. "Yeah," Jamal said, leaning in, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "You know how the warehouse district has been stagnant? I mean, it pays the bills, but it is old school, bricks and mortar. Tiffany says we are sitting on dead equity." Dead equity. I had built that dead equity with my bare hands while fighting off union busters and city inspectors. "And what does Tiffany suggest?" I asked, keeping my face neutral. "Crypto, Dad." Jamal said, his eyes widening with excitement. "She has this connection, a friend from her days at Yale who runs a private exchange in Malta. They have an algorithm that tracks arbitrage opportunities in emerging coins." She showed me the projections. "Dad, we are talking about 300% returns in 6 months. I stared at him. Crypto, Malta, Yale connection. It was a bingo card of red flags, and she needs capital to invest, I asked. "Well, yeah," Jamal said. "You have to buy in at a certain tier to get access to the algorithm." She was thinking, once we get the insurance stuff sorted out and the power of attorney, we could maybe liquidate the South lot, just the unused part, put it into Bitcoin and this new coin called... He said a name. I didn't even hear it. It sounded like scam coin. I looked at my son's hands. They were soft, pianist's hands. Coder's hands. They had never held a shovel. They had never held a gun. He didn't know that money wasn't magic. He didn't know that 300% returns didn't exist unless you were selling drugs or weapons. She showed you projections, I asked. On her iPad, Jamal said. Graphs and everything. It is legit, Dad. She wants to double our family fortune. She says she wants to surprise you. She wants to show you that she can add value, not just spend it. I felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't anger anymore. It was grief. Jamal wasn't greedy. He wasn't trying to steal my money to buy Ferraris. He was trying to impress me. He thought that if he could turn my millions into billions, I would finally look at him the way I looked at my foreman. He wanted to be a businessman like his dad. Tiffany had found his weak spot. She wasn't just seducing him with sex. She was seducing him with his own insecurity. She had convinced him that by handing her the keys to the vault he was being a good son. That was the cruelest part. She had weaponized his love for me against me. Jamal, I said softly. Yeah, Dad. Do you trust me? Of course. Do you remember when you were 6 and you found that baby bird in the yard and you wanted to keep it in a shoebox? Jamal smiled, confused by the change of subject. Yeah, I named him Tweety. And do you remember what I told you? You told me to put it back in the tree, Jamal said. You said sometimes helping hurts. I looked at him. I reached out and touched his cheek. Sometimes to save something. You have to let it fall, I said. Jamal frowned. What do you mean, Dad? Is this about the crypto? If you don't like it, we don't have to do it. Tiffany just thought, it is not about the crypto, son, I said. It is about the nature of the world. There are sheep and there are wolves. And the worst kind of wolf is the one that wears a sheep's wool coat. Jamal laughed nervously. You are speaking in riddles, Dad. You are tired. Maybe I said. I stood up. My knees popped. I looked at him in the mirror one last time. The happy groom. The man about to walk into a buzzsaw. If I stopped the wedding right then in the dressing room, he would have hated me. He would have thought I was a jealous, controlling old tyrant who crushed his dreams. He would have eloped with her the next day, and she would have killed him in a hotel room in Vegas instead of here. No, he had to see the wolf eat. He had to see the blood. I fixed his tie. I tightened the knot until he blinked. You look good, son, I said. You look like a man ready to face his destiny. Thanks, Dad. Let's go, I said. The music is starting. As we walked out of the dressing room, Jamal was bouncing on the balls of his feet, dreaming of crypto millions and a happy life. I was walking beside him carrying a grenade with the pin pulled out. Back in the ballroom, the memory faded. I looked at Jamal sitting at the table, his head in his hands, Tiffany whispering poison in his ear. He was still that little boy with the shoebox. He was trying to protect the bird, but the bird was a viper. I gripped the microphone tighter. My knuckles turned white. I am sorry, Jamal, I thought. This is going to hurt you more than it hurts her, but one day you will thank me for the scar. I raised the microphone to my lips. I looked at Tiffany. She was still glaring at me, defiant, thinking she could still spin this. She thought she was fighting a senile old man. She didn't know she was fighting a father who had just realized that his son's innocence was the most dangerous thing in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I repeated, my voice steady and cold as the grave I was supposed to be in. I hope you enjoyed the cake, because the icing is about to get a little bitter. I pointed the microphone at the projector screen. Trevon, I said, hit it. It was time to kill the sheep to save the man. The microphone was heavy in my hand, but I lowered it for a second because I saw Trevon moving through the crowd like a shadow cutting through smoke. He wasn't looking at the bride and he wasn't looking at the cake. He was looking at me, and his face was the color of old ash. He held his phone in one hand and a crumpled piece of paper in the other. He didn't have to speak for me to know that the news was bad. In my line of work, you learn to read a man's walk, and Trevon was walking like a man carrying a body. I stepped back from the center of the room, moving toward the edge of the stage where the shadows were deeper. The band was playing a cover of a Stevie Wonder song, something upbeat and joyous that felt disgusting against the backdrop of what was happening. Trevon reached me, and he didn't even try to whisper. He just shoved the phone into my hand. Look at the levels, boss, he said, his voice shaking in a way I had never heard before. My friend at the lab ran the sample from the glass shard and the rag. He ran it twice because he didn't believe the machine the first time. I looked at the screen. It was a graph with a red spike that shot up like a skyscraper. I didn't understand the chemistry, but I understood the name of the compound listed at the top, midazolam. and below that a synthetic opioid that was usually used to sedate elephants or large game animals. She didn't just want you to sleep, Trevon said, wiping sweat from his forehead. That dose combined with the alcohol in a vintage wine would have stopped your heart within 20 minutes. It would have looked exactly like a massive cardiac arrest. No foaming at the mouth, no convulsions, just lights out. I stared at the graph. The line was red and jagged like the scar on Nikolai's neck. I looked across the room at Tiffany. She was laughing at something the fake senator was saying, her head thrown back, her neck exposed. She looked so full of life. It was hard to reconcile that image with the cold-blooded killer who had poured me a glass of death not an hour ago. She had looked me in the eye and toasted to my health while handing me a cup of poison. My hand started to tremble, not from age, but from a rage so pure and hot, it felt like I had swallowed a coal. I had built my life on honorable battles. You fight the union with contracts. You fight the competition with better prices. You fight the winter with better insulation. But this was warfare without rules. This was a predator who saw my family not as people, but as meat. And then my other pocket buzzed. It was the signal from Saul. Trevon handed me the crumpled paper he was holding. It was a printout fresh from the portable printer Saul kept in his car. This just came through from the private investigator, Trevon said. Saul said you need to read the whole thing before you say a word on that microphone. I unfolded the paper. It was a dossier, a background check that dug deeper than just credit scores and college degrees. This one went back to birth certificates and fingerprints. The photo at the top was Tiffany, but the hair was dark brown and stringy, and the eyes looked harder, hungrier. The name under the photo wasn't Tiffany Miller. It was Becky Sue Taggart, born in a trailer park outside of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I scanned the page, my eyes devouring the text. Subject has a history of fraud dating back to age 16. Arrested for check kiting in 2008. Charges dropped due to lack of evidence. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was the marital history. Husband number 1, Gary Wilson. Oil rig foreman in Texas. Married 2012. Died 2013. Hunting accident. Sole beneficiary of a $500,000 policy. Becky Sue was the only witness. Husband number 2, Richard Chen. Software developer in San Jose. Married 2016. Died 2017. Drowning accident while kayaking. Body never recovered. Life insurance payout $2 million. Husband number 3, Arthur Vance, Wall Street broker. Married 2020. Died 2021. Ruled a suicide after he went bankrupt. All assets transferred to his wife 2 days before he jumped. I looked up from the paper. My breath caught in my throat. She wasn't just a gold digger. She was a serial killer. She was a black widow who moved from state to state, changing her name and her hair color, leaving a trail of dead men and emptied bank accounts in her wake. And Jamal. My sweet, naive Jamal, who played the piano and rescued baby birds. He was husband number 4. I looked at the dates. The pattern was terrifyingly consistent. 1 year. She kept them for exactly 1 year. Long enough to establish residency, long enough to get the paperwork signed, long enough to make the death look like a tragedy instead of a hit. But with me, she was accelerating the timeline. She was desperate. The debts to the Russian mob must be huge. She couldn't wait a year for Jamal to inherit my money naturally. She needed me dead now so she could control the trust and liquidate the assets to pay off Nikolai. I realized with a jolt of terror that my life was being measured in minutes, not years. If the wine hadn't worked, she would try something else. Maybe a push down the stairs at the reception, maybe a car accident on the way home. And if she couldn't get to me, she would use Jamal as leverage. I looked at my son again. He was sitting there looking at his new bride with that puppy dog adoration. He had no idea he was sleeping next to a graveyard. He had no idea that the hands holding his were the same hands that had probably pushed a man off a kayak and pulled a trigger in the woods of Texas. I felt a wave of nausea. I had let this happen. I had been so focused on testing her, on playing the grumpy old man, that I hadn't seen the monster until she was inside the gate. Mr. King Trevon whispered, "Saul is at the back door. He has the certified copies. He says we have enough to put her away for life, but we have to move now. If she senses we know she might run, or worse, or worse." I knew what worse meant. It meant a hostage situation. It meant Nikolai coming back with guns. It meant my son catching a bullet meant for me. I folded the paper and put it in my inside pocket right next to my heart. It burned there, the proof of her evil. I looked at Trayvon. "Lock the doors," I said, my voice low and steady. What Trayvon asked. "Lock the doors, Trayvon. No one leaves, not the guests, not the waiters, and especially not her." "But the fire code," Trayvon started. "Damn the fire code," I snapped. "I am not letting her walk out of here. I am not letting her disappear to another state to find another victim. It ends tonight." Trayvon nodded, a grim look of understanding on his face. He signaled to two of my warehouse guys who were working security at the door. Big men who owed me their livelihoods. They moved quietly to the exits, turning the locks. I gripped the microphone again. My hand was steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I was Darius King. I had built skyscrapers. I had paved highways. I had survived the death of the only woman I ever loved. I was not going to let a grifter from Alabama destroy my legacy. I walked back to the center of the stage. The spotlight hit me blindingly bright. Tiffany looked up. She saw the change in my posture. She saw that the cane was no longer supporting me but resting lightly in my hand like a weapon. She saw the look in my eyes. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine fear in hers. She knew. She didn't know how I knew, but she knew the game was up. She started to stand up, reaching for her purse. The purse that probably held a burner phone and a passport. "Sit down, Tiffany," I boomed into the microphone, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. The music stopped. The chatter died. Every eye in the room turned to me. "Sit down," I repeated, darker this time. "We haven't even opened the gifts yet, and I have a very special gift for you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the dossier. I held it up for the room to see. "It is a storybook," I said. "It is a fairy tale about a girl named Becky Sue." Tiffany froze halfway out of her chair. Her face went white as the fondant on the cake. Jamal looked at me, then at her. "Dad, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I am reading the news, son," I said. I looked at the camera. I looked at the crowd. Chapter 1. I said, opening the file. Once upon a time, in a trailer park in Tuscaloosa, the air in the room grew heavy, charged with the static of impending violence. I could see Mr. Miller reaching under his jacket. I could see the fake guests shifting uncomfortably. But I didn't care. I was the lion in the center of the ring, and I was about to roar. The silence that followed my opening line about the fairy tale of Becky Sue did not last long. I had expected Tiffany to scream or run or maybe even attack me. I was ready for violence. I was ready for denial. But I had underestimated her. I had forgotten that a predator does not panic when the trap snaps. A predator adapts. Before I could read the second sentence from the dossier, Tiffany burst into tears. It wasn't a cry of guilt. It was a cry of heartbreak. She rushed toward me, her hands outstretched, not to strike me but to hold me. She threw her arms around my neck, burying her face in my shoulder, so the crowd could see her shaking shoulders while she whispered into my ear, "You are going to regret this, you old bat." Then she pulled back and looked at the crowd, her eyes filled with crocodile tears. "I am so sorry, everyone," she sobbed, her voice trembling perfectly. We were hoping he could make it through the reception without an episode. Dr. Evans said the dementia creates false memories. He gets confused. He thinks he is reading stories to his grandchildren. She looked at me with a pity that was more insulting than a slap. "Oh, Dad," she said softly, reaching for the microphone, "give me that. You are tired. You are mixing up your stories again. There is no Becky Sue. You are at Jamal's wedding. Remember, I tried to pull away, but Mr. Miller was suddenly there, his hand gripping my elbow with the force of a vice clamp. "Let's get him a chair," Mr. Miller announced to the room. "He is having a spell." The room shifted. I could feel it. The tension that I had built, the accusation that hung in the air, it all dissolved into awkward sympathy. The guests weren't looking at a brave whistleblower exposing a criminal anymore. They were looking at a senile old man ruining his son's wedding with the ramblings of a broken mind. I saw my sister Hattie cover her mouth. I saw my friends from the union shaking their heads sadly. "He is losing it," someone whispered. "I heard it was Alzheimer's," another voice replied. "No!" I shouted, trying to shake off Mr. Miller's grip. "I am not crazy. This woman is a fraud. Her name is Becky Sue Taggart, and she is wanted in 3 states. But the more I shouted, the more crazy I sounded. That is the genius of the gaslight. The truth sounds like hysteria when the lie is told calmly. Tiffany shook her head, wiping her eyes. See, she said to the room, he gets paranoid. He thinks everyone is out to get him. It breaks my heart. We have been trying to keep it private, but she trailed off, letting the crowd fill in the blanks. Jamal stood up. He looked destroyed. He didn't look at the dossier I had dropped on the table. He looked at me. Dad, he said, his voice cracking. Please, just sit down. You are making a scene. I looked at my son. The pain in his eyes was real. He believed her. She had spent months planting these seeds, telling him I was forgetting things, telling him I was mixing up names. And now she was harvesting the crop. I am not making a scene, Jamal, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I am making a rescue. Mr. Miller squeezed my arm harder, hitting a pressure point that made my hand go numb. The microphone slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor with a screech of feedback. Come on, Darius, Mr. Miller muttered in my ear. Don't make me break your arm right here. I let them lead me to a chair. I sat down, breathing hard. I needed to regroup. I had played the card too early, or maybe just in time. I watched Tiffany pick up the dossier. She didn't open it. She just clutched it to her chest like it was a hymnal. I will put this away for you, Dad, she said sweetly. We can read stories later. She walked away toward the head table. I knew she was going to destroy it. But she didn't know I had copies. She didn't know Saul had the originals. I need water, I rasped. I will get it, Jamal said, jumping up. No, Tiffany interjected. Let him go to the restroom. He probably needs to splash some water on his face. He looks flushed. She looked at Mr. Miller. Uncle Nico, why don't you help him to the facilities? Make sure he doesn't get lost. The way she said get lost sent a chill down my spine. I stood up. I didn't want Mr. Miller touching me again. I can walk, I snapped. I walked toward the exit, the crowd parting for me like I was a leper. I could hear the whispers. So sad. He used to be such a strong man. They should put him in a home. I reached the hallway. The restrooms were down a short corridor to the right. I knew this hotel. I had been here a dozen times for union banquets. I walked toward the door marked Men. I was sure it was the door on the left. I reached for the handle, but just as I pushed it open, I heard a scream, a high-pitched shriek that echoed off the tiled walls. I looked up. I was standing in a room full of mirrors and vanity counters. A woman, the same woman I had spilled wine on earlier, was standing there fixing her makeup. She spun around, her eyes wide with shock. "Get out!" she screamed. "This is the ladies' room." I froze. I looked back at the door. There was a pink sign on it, Women. But I swore. I swore on my mother's grave that 5 seconds ago it was the men's room. Then I saw it, a small piece of tape on the door frame. And down the hall I saw a waiter, one of the hired staff, not my guys, hurriedly peeling a temporary sign off the other door. It was a setup, a cheap high school prank but effective. Mr. Miller appeared behind me. He grabbed my shoulder and yanked me out of the room. "Jesus, Darius," he shouted loud enough for the hallway to hear. "You can't go in there. That is the ladies' room." Guests were poking their heads out of the ballroom. They saw me being pulled out of the women's restroom. They saw the woman storming out behind me. "He is a pervert," she yelled, pointing a manicured finger at me. "He walked right in while I was changing?" "No," I stammered. "The sign..." They switched the sign. Mr. Miller shook his head, looking at the gathering crowd with a performance of weary patience. "I am so sorry, ma'am," he said. "He is confused. He doesn't know where he is." Tiffany appeared, pushing through the crowd. "Oh my God," she cried. "Dad." "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I roared. "You set me up. You switched the damn signs." Tiffany turned to Jamal, who had just run up. "See, Jamal," she said, sobbing again. "He is getting worse. He is wandering into the ladies' room. He is shouting about conspiracies. We can't keep him at home anymore. It is dangerous. What if he wanders into traffic? What if he hurts someone?" Jamal looked at me. He looked at the sign on the door. He looked at the angry woman. "Dad," he whispered. Why, I looked at my son. I saw the doubt hardening into resolve. He was accepting the narrative. His father was gone, replaced by a senile, dangerous stranger. "It wasn't me, son," I said quietly. "It is a trick." Jamal closed his eyes. I think Tiffany is right," he said softly. The words hit me harder than any bullet. Tiffany is right, I asked. We can't take care of you, Jamal said. Not like this. You need professional help, Dad. Tiffany placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. I called Dr. Evans, she said soothingly. He has a bed open at Shady Acres. The ambulance is on its way. They can take him right after the reception. It is for the best, Jamal. We have to do it for him. Shady Acres. It sounded like a retirement community. I knew it was a dumping ground, a place where they medicated old people into zombies so they wouldn't complain when their estates were drained. So that was the plan. Not murder. Not yet. Institutionalization. Declare me incompetent tonight. Get the power of attorney activated tomorrow. Liquidate the assets next week. And then, when I was just a drooling vegetable in a wheelchair, maybe a pillow over the face. It was cleaner. It was smarter. I looked at Tiffany. She was hiding a smirk behind her handkerchief. You are good, I told her. You are very good. She leaned in close, pretending to adjust my collar. And you are done, Darius, she whispered. Enjoy the jello. I looked around. I was surrounded. Mr. Miller on one side, the fake uncle on the other. Jamal paralyzed by grief and manipulation, the crowd watching the spectacle of the crazy old man. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It wasn't fear. It was my phone. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I knew who it was. Traven was ready. Saul was ready. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had humiliated me into submission. They thought that by making me look crazy, they had disarmed me, but they had forgotten one thing. The truth doesn't care if you are crazy. The truth just is. I took a deep breath. I straightened my jacket. I brushed Mr. Miller's hand off my shoulder. I am not going to Shady Acres, I said clearly. Tiffany sighed. Don't make a scene, Dad. The order is already signed. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You know, Tiffany, I said. You spent so much time building a fake past for yourself, you forgot to check the real present. I turned to Jamal. Son, I said, I want you to look at your phone. Jamal looked confused. What? Look at your phone, Jamal. You got an email 2 minutes ago. From Saul. Tiffany's eyes widened. She tried to grab Jamal's arm. Don't look at it, baby. It is probably just more of his nonsense. But Jamal pulled away. Curiosity is a powerful thing. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. I watched his face. I watched the color drain from his cheeks. I watched his eyes scan the PDF attachment. It wasn't the dossier. It was something better. It was the video from the scrapyard, the one Trevon had sent while everyone was staring at the ladies' room door. Turn up the volume, son, I said. Jamal tapped the screen, and suddenly through the silence of the hallway came the voice of his beloved bride. 30 days. We get married today. Then we wait 3 weeks and pull the plug. The sound was tinny coming from the small speakers, but in the quiet corridor it sounded like thunder. Tiffany lunged for the phone. Give me that. But Jamal stepped back. He looked at the phone. He looked at the woman in the white dress. And then he looked at me. And for the first time all day, he didn't see a senile old man. He saw his father. Dad, he whispered. I smiled. A real smile this time. The show is over, Becky, I said. And then I turned to the ballroom. Trayvon, I shouted. Put it on the big screen. It was time to bring the house down. The hallway outside the ballroom was a strange purgatory between the heaven of the party and the hell of the reality I was living in. The music thumped through the heavy double doors, a muffled bass line that sounded like a heartbeat under stress. I stood there with my son, the man I had raised to be a prince, watching him crumble under the weight of a truth he refused to carry. Jamal was pacing. He was sweating through his tuxedo shirt, wiping his forehead with a trembling hand. He looked at the closed doors, then back at me, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. He wanted to go back inside. He wanted to go back to the cake and the champagne and the lies. He wanted to pretend that the video on his phone, the voice of his wife talking about pulling the plug, was just a glitch, a mistake, a bad dream. Jamal, I said, keeping my voice low and steady, stop walking. Look at me. He stopped, but he didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. Dad, please, he whispered. I can't do this right now. Tiffany is waiting. The guests are waiting. We have to do the first dance. It is our song. I took a step toward him. My cane clicked on the marble floor, a sharp, lonely sound. There is no song, Jamal, I said. There is only a dirge. You heard the recording. You heard her voice. She gave you 30 days. Do you understand what that means? It means I am a dead man walking, and you are the widower she is grooming to be her next victim." Jamal shook his head violently, squeezing his eyes shut. "No," he said. "No. It is out of context. You don't know her dad. She has a dark sense of humor. Maybe she was joking. Maybe she was role-playing. People do weird things. It doesn't mean she is a killer." I stared at him. The denial was so deep it was terrifying. It wasn't just love. It was survival. If he admitted I was right, he had to admit that the last year of his life was a lie. He had to admit that he had been played. And for a man like Jamal, who prided himself on his intellect, on his ability to see patterns in code, admitting he had been hacked was impossible. I reached into my pocket. I had one card left to play before I burned the whole house down. "I didn't want to show you this," I said. "I wanted the voice to be enough, but I see that she has blinded you." I pulled out the physical photograph that Trayvon had printed along with the dossier. It was grainy, taken with a zoom lens from behind a stack of crushed cars, but the clarity was undeniable. It showed the scrapyard. It showed the rust and the mud. In the foreground was my Lincoln Town car, and leaning against the hood were two people. One was Nikolai, the man currently posing as a loving uncle inside that ballroom. The other was Tiffany. She was wearing her white coat, the one she wore to the rehearsal dinner. Her hands were on his chest, and he was kissing her. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, a deep, possessive kiss. I held the photo out. My hand was shaking, not from age, but from the sheer weight of the heartbreak I was about to inflict on my son. "Look at it, Jamal," I commanded. He refused. He turned his head away. "I don't want to see your Photoshop tricks, Dad," he snapped. "I know you hate her. I know you think I am not good enough for her family." I grabbed his arm. My grip was hard. "I don't hate her because she is white, Jamal," I shouted. "I don't hate her because she is rich. I hate her because she is banging a Russian loan shark on the hood of my car while planning my murder." "Look at the damn picture." I shoved the photo into his chest. He instinctively grabbed it to keep it from falling. He looked down. Time seemed to stop. I watched his eyes scan the image. I watched his brain try to reject it. I watched him look for the flaws, for the pixelation, for the signs of a fake. But there were none. It was raw reality. I saw his face crumble. For a second, just a second, the truth got in. I saw the horror. I saw the realization that the woman he had kissed at the altar an hour ago had been kissing another man, a dangerous man, just hours before that. But then the defense mechanism kicked in. The cognitive dissonance was too painful. His mind couldn't handle the trauma, so it converted it into anger. He crushed the photo in his fist. He looked up at me and his eyes were full of tears, but they were angry tears. "How much did you pay for this?" he yelled. "What?" I asked, taken aback. "How much did you pay someone to make this?" he screamed, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. "You have always been jealous, haven't you? You have been lonely since Mom died, and you can't stand to see me happy. You want me to be miserable like you. You want me to sit in that big empty house with you and talk about the old days." "Jamal, stop," I said, stepping closer. "No," he shouted. "You are toxic. Dad, Tiffany told me you would do this. She said you would try to sabotage us because you are afraid of losing control. This is sick. Using AI to make fake porn of my wife, is that how low you have sunk?" He was rewriting reality in real time. He was parroting the lines she had fed him. She had inoculated him against the truth so well that the evidence just made him hate me more. "Son," I said, reaching out to touch his shoulder. "Please, just come with me. Just leave the building. We can sort this out." "Don't touch me," he screamed. And then he did it. He shoved me. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a shove fueled by a year of manipulation, by the fear of humiliation, by the desperate need to protect his fragile ego. He put both hands on my chest and pushed with all his strength. I wasn't ready for it. I was leaning on my cane. The force of the blow threw me off balance. My cane clattered across the floor. My feet slipped on the polished marble. I fell backward. Time slowed down. I felt the air leave my lungs as my back hit the hard floor. My head cracked against the stone with a sickening thud. My glasses flew off and skittered away. I lay there stunned. The pain radiated from my hip and my head, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the hole that had just been punched through my heart. My son had struck me. The boy I had carried on my shoulders. The boy I had taught to tie his shoes. The boy who had cried when his goldfish died. He had just put his hands on his 74-year-old father and thrown him to the ground. Silence fell over the hallway. Jamal stood over me, his chest heaving, his hands still raised in the pushing position. He looked down at me, and for a moment the anger vanished, replaced by sheer terror. He looked at his own hands as if they didn't belong to him. "Dad," he whispered. I tried to sit up, but the room spun. I groaned. Jamal took a step toward me, his hand reaching out. "Oh my God. Dad, I didn't mean to." But before he could help me, the double doors of the ballroom burst open. Tiffany stood there. She must have been listening. She must have been waiting for the explosion. She saw me on the floor. She saw Jamal standing over me, and she didn't gasp in horror. She didn't rush to help. She smiled, a tiny, victorious smile that vanished instantly, replaced by her performance face. "Oh my God," she shrieked, rushing to Jamal's side. "Jamal, are you okay? Did he attack you?" She grabbed Jamal, pulling him away from me. He fell." Jamal stammered, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't mean to push him. He was saying crazy things, Tiff. He showed me this picture." Tiffany snatched the crumpled photo from Jamal's hand without even looking at it. She balled it up tighter and shoved it into her bodice. "It is fake, baby," she cooed, stroking his face, keeping his eyes on her, not on me. "Of course it is fake. He is sick. We talked about this. The dementia makes him aggressive. He tried to hurt you, didn't he? I don't know," Jamal sobbed. I struggled to my elbows. My head was pounding. "Jamal," I croaked. "Look at me. Don't look at him," Tiffany commanded, her voice sharp. "He is dangerous. Look at what he made you do. He is trying to destroy you, Jamal. He wants to ruin our wedding because he is a bitter, hateful old man." She looked down at me. Her eyes were cold, dead things. "You need to leave Darius," she said, "or I am calling the police and pressing charges for assault. I saw you lunge at him." I looked at my son. He was letting her hold him. He was burying his face in her neck, hiding from the shame of what he had done. He was choosing the lie because the truth was too heavy to carry. I slowly pulled myself up. My hips screamed in protest. I had to crawl a few feet to retrieve my glasses. I put them on. The world came back into focus, but it was a darker, uglier world than the one I had known 5 minutes ago. I reached for my cane. I used it to pull myself to my feet. I stood there swaying slightly, brushing the dust off my tuxedo. I looked at Jamal. "You pushed me down, son," I said softly. Jamal flinched. He didn't look up. "You pushed your father down for a woman who is stealing your soul," I continued. "Stop it," Jamal yelled, his voice muffled by Tiffany's shoulder. "Just go. Go to the hospital. Go anywhere but here." I looked at Tiffany. She was glaring at me, challenging me. She thought she had won. She thought that by turning my son against me, she had disarmed me. She thought I would limp away in shame, broken by the rejection. But she didn't know Darius King. She didn't know that pain clarifies. She didn't know that the crack in my head had just let the light in. "I am not going anywhere," I said. I adjusted my tie. I checked my pocket to make sure the phone with the connection to the projector was still there. "You want a wedding, Tiffany?" I asked. "You want a memorable night?" I turned back to the doors. "Let's go back inside," I said. I think I finally found the right words for my toast. I pushed the doors open and walked back into the darkness of the party, leaving my sobbing son and his predator wife in the hallway. The time for whispering was over. The time for saving Jamal's feelings was over. Now I was going to save his life. And if I had to burn his heart to ash to do it, then so be it. The lion was wounded, and that just made him more dangerous. The marble floor of the Drake Hotel was cold against my cheek, a stark contrast to the burning heat in my hip where I had landed. The pain was sharp, a jagged bolt of lightning shooting down my leg, but I welcomed it. Pain was real. Pain was honest. Unlike the woman standing over me, pain didn't lie to your face while picking your pocket. I lay there, my eyes squeezed shut, listening to the chaotic symphony of my son's destruction. I could have gotten up. I was a king, and kings do not stay on the floor. My pride screamed at me to rise, to dust off my tuxedo, and to finish the fight standing tall. But 40 years in the logistics business had taught me that sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to stop moving. Sometimes you have to play dead to see who comes to bury you and who comes to mourn you. So I stayed down. I let my body go limp. I slowed my breathing, counting the beats of my heart, which was thumping against the hard stone floor. Dad Jamal's voice was a broken whisper. I could hear the terror in it. He sounded 5 years old again, standing over a broken vase, terrified of the consequences. "Dad, please get up. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to." I felt his hand on my shoulder, shaking me gently. "Dad, don't answer him, Darius," I told myself. "Let him sit in this fear. He needs to feel the weight of what he has done. He needs to understand that his blind loyalty to that woman has physical consequences." Then I heard the doors burst open again, the click-clack of stiletto heels on marble. Fast, aggressive, like a machine gun firing in bursts. Tiffany. She didn't run to me. She didn't drop to her knees to check my pulse or see if I was breathing. A normal person, a person with a shred of humanity, would have checked for life. But Tiffany Miller or Becky Sue or whatever name she would wear next was not looking for life. She was looking for an opportunity. "Oh my God," she shrieked. Her voice was pitched perfectly for the gathering crowd, loud enough to carry down the hallway, but modulated with just the right amount of hysterical grief. "What happened? Did he attack you again?" She was rewriting history before the ink was even dry. "No," Jamal stammered, his voice thick with tears. I pushed him. He was getting in my face, and I just pushed him, and he fell, and now he won't wake up. Tiff, I think I killed him." "Good," I thought. Let him believe it. Tiffany gasped, a theatrical sound that made my skin crawl. "He is having a stroke," she yelled. "Look at him. He is unresponsive." I wasn't twitching. I wasn't foaming. I was just lying there. But she didn't need symptoms. She just needed a diagnosis that fit her timeline. "Call an ambulance," she screamed to the onlookers who were now spilling out of the ballroom. "Call 911. Tell them it is a stroke. Tell them we need transport to Shady Acres immediately. Dr. Evans is on call." I felt her hands on me then. She wasn't checking my vitals. She was rummaging through my jacket pockets. She was looking for the phone. She was looking for the evidence. Her fingers were digging into my ribs, searching, invasive. She found the phone connected to the projector system. I felt her slide it out. I held my breath. If I moved now, I would lose the element of surprise later. "She is stealing the evidence," Jamal, I screamed inside my head. "Open your eyes, son. She is looting your father's body before it is even cold." But Jamal was too busy sobbing into his hands to see anything. "Help me turn him over," Tiffany commanded. "We need to prepare him for transport." She wanted me on my back. She wanted to look at my face to see if I was faking. I felt Mr. Miller's heavy hands grab my shoulder. He rolled me onto my back roughly. My head lolled to the side. I kept my eyes shut, my jaw slack. Tiffany leaned over me. I could smell her perfume, orchids and rot. She put her face close to mine. To the crowd, it looked like a loving daughter listening for a breath. In reality, she was whispering to me. "You should have taken the deal, old man," she hissed, her voice so low only I could hear it. "Now you are going to the funny farm. And don't worry about Jamal. I will take good care of him." For about 6 months. I wanted to bite her nose off. I wanted to snap my teeth shut and tear that perfect face apart. But I lay still. "I am not going to the funny farm, Becky," I thought. "And you are not going to the bank." I heard the sirens in the distance. They were coming fast. She must have had them on standby. A private ambulance service, no doubt, paid for by the same people who paid Nikolai. "He is not breathing well," Tiffany shouted, standing up and addressing the crowd. "We need to get him to Dr. Evans. He knows Dad's condition. He has the files." She was establishing the chain of custody. If I went to a regular ER, they would run toxicology screens. They would find the sedative. They would see the bruises. But if I went to Dr. Evans, I would just be another senile old man who had a tragic fall. The crowd murmured. Poor Jamal. His father was so unstable. It is for the best. I felt a wave of despair. Was this how it ended, lying on a hotel floor framed by a grifter while my friends and family watched and did nothing? Then I heard a sound that sounded like salvation. It was the heavy, rhythmic thud of work boots. "Wait a minute," a deep voice boomed. "Trayvon!" The crowd parted. I couldn't see him, but I could feel his presence. He walked with the heavy, undeniable momentum of a freight train. "Step away from him," Trayvon said. Tiffany's voice spiked. "Who are you?" "You are just the driver. Get back in the car. We are handling this." "I am not just the driver," Trayvon said, his voice calm and hard as steel. "I am Mr. King's medical proxy." "What?" Tiffany laughed, a nervous, shrill sound. "That is ridiculous. Jamal is his next of kin. Jamal is his proxy." "Not according to the paperwork filed this morning," Trayvon lied smoothly. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. I had signed a lot of things with Saul in the last 24 hours. I heard the rustle of paper. "Mr. King has a standing order," Trayvon announced. In the event of a medical emergency, he is to be transported to University Hospital by his private transport. No outside ambulances, no rogue doctors. University Hospital, that was the public hospital. The one with strict protocols. The one where Tiffany had no friends on the payroll. No. Tiffany shouted. He needs specialized care. Dr. Evans is waiting. I am taking him, Trayvon said. I felt Trayvon kneel beside me. His hands were gentle, unlike Mr. Miller's. He slid an arm under my neck and another under my knees. I have got you, boss, he whispered. He lifted me. I am a big man, 200 pounds of solid weight. But Trayvon lifted me like I was a child. Put him down, Tiffany screamed. You are kidnapping him. Uncle Nico, stop him. I felt the air shift as Mr. Miller stepped forward. Put the old man down, boy. Mr. Miller growled. Trayvon didn't back down. I suggest you step back, Trayvon said, unless you want me to tell the police about the gun you are carrying under that cheap suit. I am sure the hotel security would love to know about that. Mr. Miller hesitated. He was a thug, but he was a thug in a room full of witnesses and cameras. He couldn't shoot a driver in the middle of the Drake Hotel hallway. Trayvon turned, carrying me toward the service elevator. Jamal, come with us, Trayvon called out over his shoulder. I waited. I prayed. Come on, son. Follow the driver. Follow your father. But Jamal didn't move. I have to stay with Tiffany, Jamal stammered. She is shaking. I can't leave her. My heart broke all over again. Even now, with his father limp in a driver's arms, he chose her. He chose the illusion. Fine, Trayvon said. But you better have a good lawyer, Jamal, because when your father wakes up, he is going to have a lot to say. Trayvon carried me into the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of Tiffany's fake sobbing and the murmurs of the crowd. As soon as the car started moving, I opened my eyes. The ceiling of the elevator was mirrored. I looked at myself. I looked like a corpse in a tuxedo. You can put me down now, son, I said, my voice groggy but functional. Trayvon didn't drop me. He lowered me gently until I was standing leaning against the rail. You okay, Mr. King? He asked, checking my head. That was a nasty fall. I touched the back of my skull. A lump the size of a golf ball was forming. I have had worse, I said. I fell off a scaffolding in '89. This is nothing. I looked at the floor indicator numbers counting down. Did you get the phone, I asked? Trayvon reached into his pocket and pulled out my phone. Not the one Tiffany stole. My real phone. She took the burner. Trayvon grinned. The one connected to the projector. She thinks she disarmed the bomb. I smiled. It hurt my face, but I smiled. And the ambulance, I asked. I called them off, Trayvon said. My cousin is waiting in the van out back. We are going to the warehouse. Saul is meeting us there. The warehouse. My fortress. My territory. Good, I said. I looked at Trayvon. He was young. He had a record. Society had written him off years ago. But today, he was the only man in Chicago I trusted with my life. You did good, Trayvon, I said. You stood tall. I learned from the best, he said. The elevator dinged. The basement level. We stepped out into the cool, damp air of the loading dock. It smelled of exhaust and garbage, but to me it smelled like freedom. I walked toward the van, my limp pronounced, but my spirit unbroken. Tiffany thought she had won the battle. She thought she had driven me off the field. She thought I was running away to lick my wounds. She was wrong. I wasn't retreating. I was flanking. I climbed into the van. I looked at the dark city skyline. Go back to the party, Trayvon, I said. He looked at me surprised. What, you want me to go back there? I nodded. I want you to go back and give Jamal a message, I said. What message? Tell him I died, I said. Trayvon's eyes went wide. Sir, tell him I died on the way to the hospital, I said, my voice cold and final. Tell him his push killed me. Tell him the stress was too much. But why, Trayvon asked. That will destroy him. Exactly, I said. I needed Jamal to feel the full weight of his actions. I needed him to think he was a murderer, because only when he was at the absolute bottom, drowning in guilt and grief, would he be able to see Tiffany for what she really was. When I am dead, she will drop the mask, I explained. She won't be the loving wife anymore. She will be the widow counting her money. She will celebrate. And when she celebrates, Jamal will see her teeth. Trayvon nodded slowly. It was a cruel plan, a biblical plan, but it was the only way. Do what I commanded, and then bring him to the warehouse. Trayvon closed the van door. I sat in the dark listening to the engine hum. I was officially dead. Now the haunting could begin. The smell of antiseptic was the first thing that hit me sharp and chemical, masking the underlying scent of dust and old timber that permeated the walls of my private office at the warehouse. Trayvon had set it up perfectly. The hospital bed was a relic from when I had injured my back in '95 and refused to stay in a public ward. The heart monitor was beeping a steady, rhythmic cadence, its sound filling the dimly lit room. I lay there with my eyes closed, listening to the sound of my son falling apart. Jamal was weeping. It wasn't the polite, stifled crying of a man at a funeral. It was the raw, ugly sobbing of a child who believes he has broken the world. He was holding my hand, his grip slippery with sweat and tears pressing his forehead against my knuckles. I killed him. Jamal choked out his voice, thick with mucus and grief. I killed him, Trayvon. He is gone because of me. I pushed him. I pushed my own father. I heard Trayvon's voice, calm and detached, playing his part in this cruel theater. It wasn't just the push, Jamal Trayvon said. It was the stress. The heart can only take so much betrayal. I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it rivaled the pain in my hip. I was torturing him. I was letting him marinate in a hell of his own making. But I knew I couldn't stop. Not yet. If I woke up now and hugged him, if I told him it was all a trick too soon, he would resent me. He would think I was manipulating him just like she was. He needed to hit the bottom. He needed to feel the absolute void of a life without me so he could understand what he was about to lose to that woman. I have to call her, Jamal sobbed, fumbling for his phone. I have to tell Tiffany. She needs to know. She loved him too, in her own way. That was the trigger. She loved him too. The delusion was so strong it was almost impressive. Even with his father lying dead in front of him, even with the memory of that photo in his mind, he was still trying to protect her narrative. He was still trying to be the good husband to the Black Widow. Enough! I squeezed his hand. Hard. Jamal froze. His sobbing stopped abruptly, replaced by a sharp intake of breath. He tried to pull his hand away, thinking it was a post-mortem spasm, but I didn't let go. My grip was iron. It was the grip of a man who had hauled steel beams and crushed Union busters. I opened my eyes. The room was dim, lit only by the green glow of the monitor and a single desk lamp. Jamal was staring at me, his eyes wide, bloodshot, and terrified. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. I turned my head slowly on the pillow. I looked him dead in the eye. "Save your tears, boy," I rasped. "You are going to need them for the truth." Jamal stumbled back, knocking over a metal tray of surgical instruments. They clattered to the floor with a deafening crash. You are alive," he stammered. "But Trayvon said, he said you were gone. He said you flatlined in the van." I sat up. It wasn't easy. My body was screaming at me, bruised and battered from the fall and the trunk and the sheer exhaustion of the day. But I forced myself upright. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I yanked the IV line out of my arm. It wasn't connected to anything important. Just a saline bag Trayvon had hung for effect, but the sight of the tape ripping and the small bead of blood made Jamal flinch. I lied. I said, my voice cold and steady, just like she lies to you every morning when she wakes up and every night when she goes to sleep. Jamal stared at me, his shock turning into confusion and then inevitably back to anger. This was a test, he shouted, his voice cracking. "You let me think you were dead. Do you have any idea what you just did to me?" I was blaming myself. I was ready to turn myself into the police. "Good," I snapped. "You should blame yourself. You put your hands on me, Jamal. You chose a woman you have known for 6 months over the man who gave you life. You deserve a few minutes of hell. I have been living in it for weeks, watching you walk into a slaughterhouse." Jamal wiped his face, aggressively smearing the tears. "You are sick, Dad," he spat. "Tiffany was right. You are twisted. I am leaving. I am going back to my wife. She is probably terrified, wondering where I am. She is probably mourning you right now, mourning me." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Is that what you think she is doing? You think she is wearing black and lighting a candle?" I reached over to the bedside table. My phone was there, connected to a small Bluetooth speaker Trayvon had set up. When I bumped into her in the hallway, I said, watching Jamal's hand on the doorknob. When she was hugging me, pretending to cry about my dementia, I didn't just drop a microphone, I dropped something else. Jamal paused, his hand freezing on the latch. "What did you do?" he asked. "I slipped a bug into her purse," I said. "A high-range transmitter. Cost me $5,000 from a guy in Israel. Battery life of 6 hours. Clarity of a bell." I tapped the screen of my phone. I opened the app. The signal was strong. "She isn't mourning, son," I said. "She is celebrating." I hit the button. Static filled the room for a second. Then the sound of a car engine. Road noise. And then voices. Crystal clear. "Woo. Did you see the old bastard fall?" It was Tiffany's voice, but the pitch was different. It wasn't the soft, cultured soprano she used with Jamal. It was lower, harsher. It was the voice of a woman who smoked cheap cigarettes and drank whiskey straight from the bottle. Jamal turned slowly from the door. His face was pale. "It was perfect," a male voice answered. "Nikolai." The push was the cherry on top. "We don't even need the doctor to fake the stroke now. The fall gives us the cause of death. Brain bleed. Accidental. The kid did our job for us." I watched Jamal. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He leaned against the doorframe for support. "He is so stupid." Tiffany's voice laughed, a cruel, cackling sound. "Did you see him crying, 'I didn't mean to push him'? God, he is pathetic." I almost felt bad. Almost. Almost. Nikolai chuckled. "So the papers, I have them in my bag," Tiffany said. "As soon as the official call comes in from the hospital, I become the grieving executor. We liquidate the South Lot on Monday. I already have the buyer lined up in Shenzhen. 20 million cash. We pay off your boss and I am on a plane to Rio by Friday." "And the husband?" Nikolai asked. There was a pause on the recording. A long, chilling silence. Then the sound of a lighter flicking. A deep exhale. "Jamal," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with boredom. "Poor Jamal. He is so distraught over killing his father. Who knows what he might do? Maybe he overdoses on sleeping pills. Maybe he drives his Tesla off a bridge. Grief makes people do crazy things, Nico." The recording fell silent save for the hum of the car engine. I hit pause. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Jamal slid down the doorframe until he was sitting on the floor. He wasn't crying anymore. He was staring at nothing. His mouth was open slightly, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down with everything he owned inside. The denial was gone. The anger was gone. There was nothing left but the crater where his life used to be. "Rio," he whispered. His voice was hollow. "She hates Brazil. She told me she is allergic to the sun." I swung my legs off the bed and stood up. I grabbed my cane. I walked over to him. I didn't look down on him with pity. I looked down on him with expectation. "She is not allergic to the sun, Jamal," I said softly. "She is allergic to honesty." Jamal looked up at me. His eyes were swimming with a mixture of horror and shame so deep it hurt to look at. "She was going to kill me," he said. "Not just you. Me." "Yes," I said. "Why?" he asked. The eternal question of the victim. "Why me?" "Because you were easy," I said brutally. "Because you are soft. Because you wanted the fairy tale so bad you didn't check if the book was written in blood." I reached out my hand. He looked at my hand, the hand he had pushed away an hour ago. "Get up," I commanded. He hesitated. I can't," he whispered. "I can't face her. I can't go back there. I am so stupid, Dad. I am so sorry." I grabbed his collar and hauled him to his feet. He was heavy, dead weight, but I didn't care. I pulled him up until his face was inches from mine. "You are not stupid," I said fiercely. "You were poisoned, but now you have the antidote." I smoothed his tuxedo jacket. I straightened his tie, which was askew. "You are a king," I said, "and kings do not hide in warehouses while thieves sit on their thrones." "But what do we do?" he asked, his voice trembling. "She has guns. She has that guy Nikolai. We have something better," I said. I turned to the desk and picked up the thick file folder, the original dossier Saul had brought. "We have the truth," I said, "and we have a room full of people waiting for a toast." I walked to the door and opened it. The cool night air of the warehouse district rushed in. Trayvon was waiting by the van, the engine idling. "Ready to go back to the party, Mr. King?" Trayvon asked, grinning. I looked at Jamal. He wiped his face. He took a deep breath. His jaw set. It wasn't the jaw of the boy who played piano anymore. It was the jaw of a man who had just survived his own execution. "I am ready," Jamal said. I clapped him on the shoulder. Then, let's go bury Becky Sue, I said. We walked to the van, the dead man and the widower. The ride back to the hotel was silent, but the air inside the van was electric. We were no longer father and son fighting each other. We were soldiers marching to the same war. And as the city lights flickered past, I checked the time. 30 minutes had passed since I'd died. Just enough time for Tiffany to get comfortable. Just enough time for her to start drinking the good champagne. Perfect. The ballroom was quieter now, the manic energy of the celebration replaced by a confused, murmuring hush. The band had stopped playing. The waiters were clearing plates with the soft clatter of china on silver moving like ghosts so as not to disturb the grieving family. From the shadows of the entrance, I watched her. Tiffany stood near the center of the room, surrounded by a small circle of her hired guests and a few of my genuine friends who had stayed behind out of concern. She was a vision of tragic beauty. Her head was bowed, a lace handkerchief pressed to her eyes. She was accepting condolences with the grace of a widow who had practiced this scene in front of a mirror 1,000 times. He was just so fragile, I heard her say, her voice trembling perfectly. We tried to tell him to slow down. Dr. Evans said his heart was a ticking time bomb. I just hope he didn't suffer. She was already burying me. She hadn't even waited for the official time of death. She was laying the groundwork for the funeral, for the swift cremation that would hide the evidence, for the reading of the will where she would dab her eyes and accept the warehouse district as a burden she must carry for the family. I looked at Jamal standing beside me. His face was a mask of granite. The tears were gone. The boy who had cried over a goldfish was gone. In his place was a man who had stared into the abyss of the woman he loved and seen a monster looking back. "Ready?" I asked softly. Jamal didn't look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on her. "Let's burn it down," he whispered. I nodded to the security guard at the door, one of my old foremen who looked like he wanted to break someone in half. He understood the assignment. He reached for the handles of the massive double doors. Boom! The doors swung open with a sound like a thunderclap hitting the stops with a force that shook the crystal sconces on the walls. The room froze. Every head turned. The murmurs died instantly. We stepped into the light. I didn't limp. The pain in my hip was still there, a hot knife twisting with every step, but I fed on it. I used it. I walked with a rhythm that was slow, deliberate, and terrifying. Tap, step, tap, step. My cane hit the marble floor, not as a crutch, but as a gavel calling a court to order. Jamal walked beside me. He didn't walk like a son following his father. He walked like a soldier marching into battle. His tuxedo jacket was buttoned, his shoulders were square, and his eyes were locked on his wife. A gasp rippled through the room. It started at the back and rolled forward like a wave until it hit the circle around Tiffany. She turned slowly, annoyed by the interruption, her face composed in a mask of tragic annoyance. "What is going on?" she began. "I told you we need—" Then she saw me. The color didn't just drain from her face, it vanished. She looked like she had been embalmed standing up. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She took a stumble step back, her high heel catching on the hem of her dress. She reached out blindly for support, grabbing the arm of Mr. Miller, whose own face had gone from thug tough to cornered rat in a split second. It was the look of a person seeing a ghost. A person who had mentally spent the inheritance money and was now watching the corpse walk back in to ask for a refund. I kept walking. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at her. I let her feel the weight of my existence. "Daddy," she squeaked. It was a pathetic sound, a high, thin noise that cracked under the pressure of the impossible reality standing before her. I thought, they said. She couldn't even finish the sentence. She couldn't say, "I thought you were dead," because that would imply she knew I was supposed to be dead. I stopped 10 feet away from her. The room was so silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "You thought what, Tiffany?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud, but it projected to the back corners of the room. It was the voice of the warehouse floor, the voice that cut through the noise of machinery. "You thought the fall killed me? Or did you think the wine would have done the job if I hadn't spilled it?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Tiffany blinked rapidly, her brain rebooting, trying to find a lie that could fit this new shape of reality. She looked at Jamal. She saw her salvation, or so she thought. She saw the husband she had manipulated for a year. She assumed he was there under duress. She assumed I had dragged him back, Jamal, she cried out, rushing toward him, ignoring me completely. Oh my God, baby, you found him. Is he okay? He wandered off. I was so scared. She reached for him. She put her hands on his chest, looking up at him with those big, tear-filled blue eyes that had worked every single time before. Tell him, Jamal, she pleaded. Tell him we were just trying to help him. Tell him about Dr. Evans. He is confused again. Jamal didn't move. He didn't hug her back. He stood there like a statue. She faltered. She felt the coldness coming off him. She looked down at his hands. They weren't reaching for her. They were clenched in fists at his sides. Jamal, she whispered, a flicker of genuine fear entering her eyes for the first time. Jamal reached into his pocket. For a second, Mr. Miller tensed his hand, moving toward his jacket. But Jamal didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a ring. It was the platinum band she had placed on his finger 2 hours ago, the symbol of their eternal union, the shackle she had used to bind him to her debt and her crimes. He held it up. The diamonds caught the light of the chandelier. He looked at the ring. Then he looked at her. "You are right, Tiffany," Jamal said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I was confused. Tiffany let out a shaky breath, thinking she had an opening. "Of course you were, baby," she cooed. "It has been such a stressful day. Your dad, he pushes you. He makes you crazy. But we can fix this. We can—" I was confused about who I was sleeping with. Jamal interrupted, his voice rising, cutting her off. He took a step toward her. She took a step back. I thought I was sleeping with Tiffany Miller, the art history major from Connecticut who loved jazz and rescued stray cats. He took another step. But I was actually sleeping with Becky Sue Taggart, the Black Widow from Alabama, who has buried 3 husbands in 3 states. The name hit the room like a bomb. Becky Sue. Tiffany flinched as if he had slapped her. Her eyes darted around the room. She saw the guests staring. She saw the waiters stopping in their tracks. She saw the walls closing in. "Jamal, stop," she hissed, dropping the sweet act. "You are making a mistake. He has brainwashed you. That file is fake. He made it on a computer." "Did he make the recording on my phone too?" Jamal asked. He held up his phone. "Did he make the recording of you laughing about my dad falling? Did he use AI to make you call me stupid? Did he fake you telling your boyfriend Nikolai that you were going to cash out and move to Rio?" Tiffany went pale. She looked at Nikolai. The big Russian was backing away slowly, trying to blend into the shadows near the exit. But the door was blocked by my security team. He was trapped. Jamal didn't stop. He was releasing a year of poison from his system, and it was coming out as pure fire. "Rio, Tiffany, really?" Jamal laughed, a broken, jagged sound. "You told me you wanted a honeymoon in Paris. You told me you loved the culture. But I guess Paris doesn't have non-extradition treaties, does it?" Tiffany's face twisted. The mask fell completely. There was no more tragic widow. There was only a cornered animal, snarling and dangerous. "You are pathetic," she spat. "You are a mama's boy who never grew up. You think you are a man. You are just a wallet with a pulse." The crowd gasped. My sister Hattie stood up, clutching her purse like a weapon. Jamal didn't flinch. He took the insult and swallowed it. Maybe he said softly, "I was a wallet. I was a fool." He looked at the ring in his hand one last time. "But the wallet is closed, Becky, and the fool just woke up." He flicked his wrist. The ring flew through the air. It hit her in the chest, bounced off the silk of her wedding dress, and clattered onto the marble floor. It spun for a moment, a tiny circle of expensive metal, before coming to rest at her feet. Tiffany looked down at the ring. Then she looked up at us. Her eyes were full of hate. Pure, unadulterated hate. "You think you have won?" she screamed, her voice shrill and ugly. "You think you can just embarrass me like this? I am your wife legally. You can't just throw a ring at me and make it go away. I own half of everything. I have rights." I stepped forward then. I tapped my cane on the floor. "Actually," I said, drawing her fire, "you don't." She spun on me. "Shut up, old man. You should be dead." I smiled, a wolfish grin that showed all my teeth. "I am hard to kill, sweetheart. And as for your rights?" I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the folder that Saul had given me. Not the dossier on her crimes. The other folder. The one with the wet ink. You see, I continued holding the papers up. While you were busy planning my funeral and counting your chickens, I was busy doing a little paperwork of my own. I opened the folder. This is a deed of transfer, I announced. Dated yesterday. It transfers the ownership of the entire King Warehouse district, the land, the buildings, and the future development rights into an irrevocable trust managed by the United Negro College Fund. Tiffany's jaw dropped. What she whispered. And this, I said, pulling out another sheet, is a modification to Jamal's trust. It states that in the event of his marriage to, let's see, anyone named Tiffany Miller or Becky Sue Taggart, his access to the family fortune is suspended until the age of 50. I tossed the papers onto the table next to the wedding cake. So you see, Becky, I said, you didn't marry a millionaire. You married a software engineer with a lease on a Tesla and a mountain of student loans. I leaned in close, enjoying the look of absolute horror dawning on her face. You married a broke man, honey. The room was silent. The only sound was the heavy breathing of Mr. Miller and the faint buzz of the neon exit sign. Tiffany looked at the papers. She looked at Jamal. She looked at Nikolai. She did the math. 0. She had done all this work, played all these games, slept in a bed she hated for a year. All for 0. And then she screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a primal sound of rage and frustration. She grabbed the wedding cake, the beautiful, expensive 5-tier cake covered in orchids, and shoved it. It crashed to the floor in an explosion of fondant and sponge. "I hate you!" she screamed, grabbing a knife from the table. "I hate all of you!" She lunged, not at me, at Jamal, but she never made it, because the doors behind us opened again, and this time it wasn't family, it was the police. The scream that tore from Tiffany's throat was not the sound of a human being. It was the sound of a demon being exorcised. She stood there, amidst the ruin of the cake, her white dress splattered with frosting and shards of sponge, her chest heaving like a trapped animal. She looked at the police officers entering from the back of the room. Then she looked at me, and finally she looked at the exit. But there was no exit. My guys were blocking the doors. Traven was standing by the stage. Jamal was standing beside me, a pillar of salt and sorrow. For a moment, silence reclaimed the room. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that happens after a bomb goes off, but before the dust settles. The guests were frozen. The hired actors were looking at each other, wondering if this was part of the script or if they were about to be accomplices to a felony. Tiffany tried one last, desperate gambit. She smoothed her hair. She wiped a smudge of icing from her cheek. She composed her face into a mask of terrified innocence. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "Officers," she cried out, her voice pitching up into a plea for help. "Thank God you are here. This man, my father-in-law, he has gone insane. He is attacking us. He threw the cake. He is hallucinating. Please, you have to take him to the hospital before he hurts someone." She was good. I had to give her that. Even with the noose tightening around her neck, she was still trying to sell the rope. The lead officer, a stern-faced woman with no patience for theatrics, paused. She looked at the destroyed cake. She looked at the old man with the cane. She looked at the bride in distress. For a second, just a split second, I saw the doubt in her eyes. The narrative of the crazy old man was powerful. But I didn't panic. I didn't shout. I didn't try to argue with her. I simply walked over to the microphone stand that was still upright near the band's stage. I tapped the mic. Thump, thump. The sound echoed through the ballroom, drawing every eye back to me. "I am not hallucinating, Tiffany," I said, my voice calm, deep, and resonating with the authority of a patriarch. "And I am not sick." I looked out at the crowd. I saw the faces of my friends, the people who had worked for me for decades. They looked confused, scared. They needed to see the truth. They needed to know why their boss, a man of honor, had turned a wedding into a war zone. "I have a few words I want to say to my daughter-in-law," I continued. "A toast, if you will." Tiffany lunged forward. "Stop him! He is going to say something crazy." But the officer held up a hand. "Let him speak, ma'am. Everyone calm down." I smiled at Tiffany. It was a cold smile. "You wanted a slideshow, didn't you?" I asked. "You wanted to show everyone the story of your love. How you met Jamal. How you fell for his charm. How you built a life together." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote control for the projector. Trevon had set it up perfectly. "Well, I think we should watch a movie," I said. But let's watch the director's cut. I pointed the remote at the massive screen behind the stage. Tiffany's eyes widened. She shook her head violently. No, no! I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't the montage of engagement photos set to Ed Sheeran that she had prepared. It wasn't the pictures of them holding hands in the park or laughing over coffee. The first image that filled the 20-foot screen was a mugshot. It was stark, unflattering. The lighting was harsh, highlighting the dark circles under the eyes and the thin, cruel line of the mouth. The hair was dyed black, stringy, and unwashed. The woman in the photo looked hard. She looked like she had lived 10 lifetimes of bad choices, but the face was unmistakable. Underneath the photo in bold black letters was the text from the Alabama Department of Corrections. Wanted. Taggart Becky Sue. Fraud, embezzlement, suspicion of homicide. A collective gasp went through the room. It sounded like all the oxygen had been sucked out at once. I watched the guests. I saw Mr. Miller, the fake father, close his eyes and curse silently. He knew the game was over. He started edging toward the kitchen door, but two of my warehouse foremen stepped into his path, arms crossed. "That is not me," Tiffany screamed. "That is Photoshop." He made it up. He is trying to frame me. I didn't answer. I just pressed the button again. The slide changed. This wasn't a photo. It was a video. The audio crackled through the high-end sound system of the Drake Hotel, the sound of wind, the sound of a car engine idling, the sound of heavy machinery in the distance. The picture was grainy but clear enough. It showed a desolate corner of a scrapyard. Piles of crushed metal rose like mountains in the background. In the center of the frame sat my Lincoln Town Car, and leaning against the hood were two figures. One was the man the guests knew as Uncle Nico. The other was the bride standing in the center of the room. On screen, they weren't acting like uncle and niece. Uncle Nico had his hand on her waist. She had her hand on his neck. They were laughing. Then the audio kicked in. "The old man is so stupid," the voice on the screen said. It was Tiffany's voice, clear as a bell. "He actually bought the orchids. He thinks I care about his dead wife." The room went deathly silent. My sister Hattie let out a sob of pure outrage. On the screen, Nico laughed. And the son, Jamal, on screen. Tiffany rolled her eyes. "He is a puppy." I snapped my fingers. He sits. "Once the old man is dead, I will have power of attorney within 48 hours. We liquidate the assets, pay off your boss, and I am gone." "What about the boy?" Nico asked. On screen, Tiffany shrugged. A cold, dismissive gesture. "Who cares? Maybe he has an accident too. Grief is a heavy burden, Nico." Then on the huge screen right above the wedding cake she had just destroyed, the Tiffany in the video leaned in and kissed the hitman. It was a long, passionate, hungry kiss. I paused the video right there, freezing that moment of betrayal in time. I looked down at the real Tiffany. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was trembling. Her entire body was shaking as if she were standing in a freezing wind. She looked at the screen, then at Jamal, then at the police. She realized there was no lie big enough to cover this. There was no gaslighting that could explain away a video of her plotting murder with her lover. I brought the microphone back to my lips. I looked at her with pity. Not for her, but for the soul she must have lost a long time ago. "You wanted a wedding, Becky," I said softly. "You wanted a spectacle. You wanted everyone to look at you." I gestured to the room. "Well, look around. They are looking." Tiffany let out a low, guttural moan. She sank to her knees, the white dress pooling around her like a shroud. "I am sorry," she whispered, looking at Jamal. "Jamal, baby, it was. I was forced. Nikolai made me—" Jamal stepped forward. He stood over her. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked empty. He didn't say a word. He just turned his back on her and walked toward me. He stood by my side, putting his hand on my shoulder. I looked at the police officer. She was no longer doubtful. Her hand was on her handcuffs. I turned back to Tiffany one last time. "Oh, and there is one more thing," I said. I pointed the remote at the screen again. I clicked to the final slide. It was a live feed, a security camera view. It showed the back alley behind the hotel. Parked next to the dumpster was a black Lincoln Town Car. The trunk was popping open. "You kept asking about the car," I said. "You wanted to know where the Lincoln was. You told Nikolai to have it crushed after the wedding to hide the evidence of me being in the trunk." Tiffany looked up. Her eyes filled with confusion and terror. "Well, I kept it for you," I said. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a growl that only she and the front row could hear. "You want that Lincoln so bad, the police are waiting for you there." I nodded to the officer. "She is all yours, Captain," I said, "and be careful." She bites. The officers moved in. Tiffany didn't fight. All the fight had gone out of her. She went limp as they pulled her up. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Jamal. She just stared at the floor, muttering to herself. It wasn't fair. It was so close. It wasn't fair. As they dragged her out, passing the guests she had hired and the family she had tried to destroy, the room remained silent. But as the doors closed behind her, a single sound broke the quiet. "It was my sister Hattie." "Amen," she said loudly. And then the room exhaled. I lowered the microphone. My hand was shaking now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the exhaustion of a man who had lived 10 years in a single day. I looked at Jamal. He was looking at the screen where the frozen image of the kiss still lingered. "Turn it off, Dad," he whispered. I handed the remote to Trayvon. "Kill it," I said. The screen went black. The movie was over. But the cleanup was just beginning. The chaos that erupted in the ballroom was not the joyous chaos of a wedding celebration, but the ugly, desperate panic of a crime scene being secured. I stood by the microphone stand, leaning heavily on my cane, watching the beautiful lie my daughter-in-law had constructed disintegrate into 1,000 jagged pieces. The illusion of wealth, the illusion of class, the illusion of love. It all evaporated under the harsh lights of the police tactical gear. The officers moved with precision. They swarmed the stage where Tiffany was still kneeling, her dress a ruin of frosting and shame. But my eyes were drawn to the periphery, to the rats trying to scurry off the sinking ship. The man playing Mr. Miller, the fake father with the silver beard and the Patek Philippe watch, had lost his senatorial bearing completely. He was sweating profusely, his eyes darting toward the service exit behind the kitchen swing doors. He nudged the woman playing Mrs. Miller, and they began to crab walk toward the shadows, trying to blend in with the terrified catering staff. They almost made it. They were 5 feet from the door when a shadow detached itself from the wall. It was Trayvon. He didn't shout. He didn't wave a gun. He simply stepped into their path, his arms crossed over his chest, his face a mask of stone. Mr. Miller tried to shove past him, snarling something about rights and lawyers, but Trayvon didn't budge. He moved with the lightning speed of a man who had survived the yard. He stuck out a foot, catching Mr. Miller by the ankle. The fake diplomat went down hard. He hit the parquet floor with a bone-rattling thud that made the guests flinch. His expensive toupee slid askew, revealing a shiny, bald pate underneath. Mrs. Miller screamed a high-pitched sound that had nothing to do with maternal instinct and everything to do with self-preservation. She tried to step over her fallen partner to save herself, but the police were already there. I watched as the officers zip-tied their hands behind their backs. The dignity was gone. The old money facade was gone. They were just 2 hired grifters rolling on the floor in rented formal wear. But the main event was center stage. 2 officers hauled Tiffany to her feet. She wasn't limp anymore. The shock had worn off, replaced by a feral, vicious energy. She was fighting them, kicking and thrashing, her fingernails clawing at the air. She looked like a wild animal caught in a trap, snapping at anything that came close. And the person closest to her was Jamal. My son was standing just outside the radius of the struggle, watching her with eyes that looked like empty windows. He wasn't crying anymore. The tears had dried up, leaving behind a barren landscape of betrayal. Tiffany saw him. She saw the pity in his gaze, and it ignited something ugly inside her. She stopped fighting the police for a second and lunged toward him, straining against the handcuffs that were clicking onto her wrists. "Help me, you idiot!" she screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was raw and guttural. "Tell them to let me go. Tell them it is a mistake. You are my husband. You have to protect me." Jamal didn't move. He shook his head slowly. "You are not my wife," he said, his voice quiet but carrying through the sudden silence of the room. "You are a stranger." That broke her. The last thread of her composure snapped. If she couldn't manipulate him, she would destroy him. She wanted to hurt him one last time, to leave a scar that would never heal. "A stranger," she laughed, a wet hacking sound. "I was the best thing that ever happened to you. Look at you. You are pathetic. You are a weak, spineless little boy playing dress-up in a tuxedo." She spat on the floor near his shoes. "You think I loved you?" she sneered, her lip curling back to reveal teeth that looked sharper than I remembered. I couldn't stand touching you. Every time you kissed me, I had to close my eyes and think of the money. I had to think about the wire transfer hitting my account in the Cayman Islands just to keep from vomiting. The room gasped. My sister Hattie covered her ears. But Jamal stood his ground. He took the words like punches, absorbing them without flinching. "You are just like your father," she continued, her voice rising to a shriek. "You think you are kings because you have money, but you are nothing. You are just a affirmative action hire who got lucky. You are soft, you are weak. You are a mama's boy who needs his daddy to fight his battles because he is too scared to handle a real woman." The racism was there, thinly veiled but unmistakable. It hung in the air, toxic and heavy. She was stripping away the pretense of equality, revealing the deep-seated contempt she had held for us the entire time. She didn't just hate us because we were her marks. She hated us because of who we were. I gripped my cane, ready to step in, ready to shield my son from this final assault, but something stopped me. Jamal held up a hand. He didn't look at me. He looked at her, and then he laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a cold, dry sound. "A mama's boy," he repeated. He stepped closer to her, invading her space. The police officers tensed, ready to intervene, but Jamal didn't raise his fist. "Not yet." "You are right, Becky," he said, using her real name like a weapon. "I was a mama's boy. My mother taught me to be kind. She taught me to trust. She taught me that love was worth fighting for. And because of her, I tried to save you. Even when the red flags were waving, I tried to see the good in you." Tiffany scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, spare me the sermon." But Jamal wasn't finished. "But my father," he continued, pointing a thumb at me without looking away from her. "My father taught me something else. He taught me that when a snake bites, you don't ask it for an apology. You cut off its head." Tiffany's eyes widened. She sensed the shift. The puppy was gone. The lion had arrived. She tried to headbutt him, a violent, desperate motion. "You are nothing," she shrieked. "You are dirt under my boot." And then it happened. Jamal didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He moved. It was a blur of motion. His hand, open-palmed, struck her across the face. Slap. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent ballroom. It wasn't a blow of abuse. It wasn't the flailing of a man out of control. It was a corrective measure. It was a boundary being drawn in stone. It was the sound of a man reclaiming his dignity from the thief who had stolen it. Tiffany's head snapped to the side. A red mark bloomed instantly on her pale cheek, right where the fake tears had been moments before. She froze. The room froze. The police officers froze. Tiffany looked back at him. For the first time all day, for the first time in their entire relationship, there was no mockery in her eyes. There was only shock. She looked at Jamal and she realized she didn't know him at all. She had underestimated the prey. "Get out of my house," Jamal said. His voice was low, devoid of emotion. "But we are at a hotel," she stammered, confused by the shift in power. "I don't mean this building," Jamal said, stepping closer until he was towering over her. "I mean, get out of my head. Get out of my heart, get out of my past, and get out of my future. You are erased. You are deleted. You are a bad line of code that I am overwriting." He looked at the officers. "Get her out of my sight," he commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order given with the authority of a king. The officers nodded. They grabbed Tiffany by the arms and hauled her backward. She didn't fight anymore. She didn't scream. She just stared at Jamal as if seeing him for the first time. She was dragged past the guests, past the ruined cake, past the screen still displaying her mugshot. As she reached the doors, she looked back. Not at Jamal. At me. Our eyes met. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just tapped my cane on the floor once. A period at the end of the sentence. The doors swung shut. She was gone. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was clean. The poison had been sucked out of the room. Jamal stood there staring at the closed doors. His hand was trembling slightly, the hand that had delivered the slap. He looked down at it as if wondering if it belonged to him. I walked over to him. The tap of my cane was the only sound in the room. I stood beside him. I didn't hug him yet. I let him stand on his own 2 feet. "You okay, son?" I asked softly. Jamal took a deep breath. He exhaled slowly, a shuddering breath that seemed to expel the last year of his life. He looked at me. His eyes were clear. The fog was gone. I lost the money, he said. The wedding costs, the gifts, the pride. I shrugged. Money is sand, I said. It washes away. It comes back. But dignity. Dignity is rock. You kept the rock. Jamal looked at the guests who were watching us with a mixture of awe and pity. He straightened his tie. He buttoned his jacket. He turned to the crowd. He walked to the microphone. I thought he was going to apologize. I thought he was going to ask for sympathy. But he didn't. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice steady, I am sorry for the disruption. The reception is over, but the bar is paid for until midnight. He paused, looking at the ruined cake. Please drink the champagne, he said. It is the only thing in this room that is real. Then he walked off the stage. He walked straight to me. Let's go home, Dad, he said. We walked out together. Not father and child, but father and man, survivors of the same war. As we stepped out into the cool Chicago night, leaving the wreckage of the wedding behind, I looked at my son, and I knew that Coretta was smiling down on us. We had lost a daughter-in-law, but we had found ourselves. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. The lion was awake, and the cub had learned to roar. If you enjoyed this story of justice and family, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut a toxic person out of your life to save yourself? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay strong and trust your gut.